Chapter 81, Hidden Mission. Fang Linian sighed, gritted his teeth and said, "If I want to live in this damn world and live better than others, how can I not fight for my life when I encounter an opportunity? I have encountered several opportunities before and missed them. This time, I definitely don't want to let it go." When Fang Linian spoke, he spoke from the bottom of his heart. It wasn't because of his good acting skills, but the deep association with his own experience and the emotion from his heart. From learning about the bad news of advanced cancer and holding on until he saw a glimpse of hope, he really seized every opportunity to get what he currently had. Lieutenant Lucan didn't doubt Fang Linian's words. In this bloody cruel apocalypse, he had seen too many desperados. It took a while before he slowly nodded and said, "Very well, don't forget your words." After speaking, he strode away and came to the team and shouted, "Assemble." An hour later, Fang Linian looked back and found that Yangfan City was already more than 30 kilometers away. He looked over from the top of a slope, and he found that there were still dots of lights, stubbornly resisting the overwhelming darkness. It inexplicably gave people a warm feeling. The environment here was barren. Only cacti, sea buckthorn, and other plants grew sparsely on the wasteland. The road was also a dirt road, but the maintenance was not bad. The environment here determined that even if there was no road, the vehicle with off-road abilities could easily drive through. The dry and solid ground would not bring much trouble to the vehicle. Fang Linian was squatting on the ground at this time, the screwdriver in his hand was spinning rapidly. In front of him was the opened hood of the vehicle which had a strong smell of burnt. Hans was assisting him by the side. At this time, Lieutenant Lucan already felt that it was a very wise choice to bring Fang Linian, because, in just 1 hour, the assembled car had so far broken down 3 times. Because Hans was very new to this car. I had never encountered it before. So he had no idea about the repair. It was the guy wrench who was leading the repair all the time. It could imagine that, without him, Hans probably couldn't even deal with the first breakdown. "It's done." Fang Linian let out a sigh of relief, wiped off his sweat, then stood up and made an okay hand gesture to the driver. Dolga skillfully turned on the engine, then he stepped on the accelerator. A series of roars came from the engine that seemed to be an old man's coughing, but the engine didn't stop in the end. Instead, it was alive again. It started to spin at high speed. Sergeant Witt blew a loud whistle. "This is so cool, let's move on." The group of people climbed into the vehicle one after another, then the car continued to drive towards the place where the task was performed. Fang Linian sat down in the innermost position and began to close his eyes to rest. In fact, except for the first time the vehicle broke down, the other 2 breakdowns were done by him. He purposely made the vehicle break down after a while. His purpose was simple, which was to show Lieutenant Lucan his value. A person who was worthless would be abandoned easily like a piece of paper after wiping the butthole. At this time, he began to think about the news that Lieutenant Lucan brought to him. His mood was a little gloomy. Obviously, the dozen or so conspirators that Lieutenant Lucan killed before should be the contestants. Among these people, there should be a guy who was very good at organization and had a strong charisma to gather people together. However, it seemed that the risk would increase after forming a team. One mistake would cause the entire team to be wiped out. It could be seen that the world was really crisis-ridden. Any carelessness would cause regrettable results. Fang Linian suddenly noticed that there was a prompt under his retinas. He quickly checked it with a move of his heart. "You have lived in this world for 10 hours. Side mission, 10 hours have been completed. You got mission reward, reconnaissance, temporary, ... Reconnaissance, temporary, release the target, including mechanical creature, then you can get simple information without any cost. This skill is a temporary skill. It will disappear after releasing 5 times or after leaving the world. After using this skill, there is a chance to fail. There is an additional 50% chance of failure to release the contestant. Its success rate is related to the user's perception. The higher the perception, the higher the skill success rate and the richer the relevant information obtained." Fang Linian also tried to use this skill, and he immediately noticed that a side halo appeared on his retinas. The ability could be activated by highlighting the target with the halo. It is very simple and difficult to be noticed. Especially Fang Linian's own perception was very high. If this temporary skill was used properly, then it could be called a magical skill. This skill really comes in handy. It's a pity that it is temporary and there are restrictions on use. But this is a side mission reward, which means that as long as the contestant, who has survived until now, will have this skill. From this perspective, this may not be a good thing. The vehicle continued to drive for 2 hours. It broke down 3 more times. Such a high probability of frequent breakdowns had increased Fang Linian's position in the team, making him an indispensable existence. Suddenly, the vehicle stopped slowly and came to a mountain wall. At the same time, Dalga, who was driving, turned off the lights before making a gesture to Lieutenant Lucan. Lieutenant Lucan nodded and jumped out of the car, then pointed the spiked flashlight in his hand to illuminate the surroundings. Finally, the flashlight was pointed on the side of the mountain wall. There was a huge arrow-shaped pattern on the mountain wall, emitting a strange green light under the light of the flashlight. This was the symbol left by the scouts of Yangfan City with special dyes. Whether it was day or night, it was translucent, which was difficult to be found. Only the special light frequency of this spike flashlight could reveal its unique light in a dark environment. After seeing this huge arrow, Lieutenant Lucan nodded, turned off the flashlight and waved to order the assembly, and then began to tell the content of the mission. Fang Linian was also listening by the side. It turned out that the mission they had to perform this time was divided into 2 parts. The first part was to hike from here to the top of the mountain 2 kilometers away, then install a portable high-energy pulse spy device. The second part was to wait here for an hour and a half. During that time period, an unmanned surveillance machine controlled by machine civilization would pass from here. The high-energy pulse spy device would send out a special signal to capture it, then it would inject a specially made computer virus into it and release it again. If all goes well, after it returns to its mother body, the computer virus it carries will spread rapidly, causing big trouble to the mechanical creatures in this area. Chapter 82, Changes. The difficulty of performing this mission was not small. First of all, according to the previous exploration, the mountain in front was the highest peak in the vicinity, and it happened to be on the flight track of the drone, so the device must be installed there. However, the intelligence showed that it was already occupied by a group of mutated monsters at this time. Therefore, if they wanted to successfully install the high-energy pulse spy device, they had to deal with these monsters. The second difficulty was that after the unmanned surveillance machine was captured, it would take as long as an hour to inject the computer virus. During this time, it was in a state of losing contact with the main base. According to the protection law formulated by Tip Han, it will enter the third sequence alert state at this time, and a patrol team would be sent to check it out. Under normal circumstances, the patrol team might have 2 Reapers and 1 Purger. According to the calculations of the intelligence department, the patrol team can arrive at the scene within 40 minutes at the latest. Not only that, once the 2 sides began to open fire, the mechanical creature patrol team would send out a warning signal when they were losing. Tip Han would raise the alert sequence to the second sequence. Then, Tip Han would send a more powerful destroyer to deal with the matter. In other words, the Team Lucan must first deal with the mutant creatures entrenched there, then they at least had to deal with a mechanical creature patrol team. Then, even if the mission was completed and the virus was injected, there was a high chance of facing the hunt of the incomparably powerful Purger. Purger had infrared vision. They were not affected by darkness at all. This was why Lieutenant Lucan said he had to get a vehicle for transportation. If there was no vehicle mobility to support the retreat, then there would be no return for them. Then Lieutenant Lucan summoned his subordinates to assign combat tasks. It was worth mentioning that he divided them into 5 small teams with 3 people per team. The first to the 4th team was the combat team and the 5th was the support team. Fang Linian, Hans, and Dalga belonged to the 5th group. There was no need to participate in the combat. Fang Linian and Hans were responsible for repairing the vehicle. Dalga seemed to have been seriously injured a year ago. Now there was still a piece of shrapnel in his body that had not been taken out, even passing down his gene had to go through a special way. He had no way to participate in combat, so he was responsible for field treatment and driving. While maintaining the vehicle, Fang Linian vaguely heard Lieutenant Lucan's battle plan. Although he could only hear some vague words, the plan seemed quite thorough. The first was to set up a trap, then they would launch the portable grenade launcher from afar. The special chemical grenade would lure out the mutated monsters, and someone would clean it up with a flamethrower. Because they had to worry that the gunfire would alert the mechanical creatures in advance, so they tried to not open fire as much as they could. After some arrangements, the 4 combat teams were formally dispatched. They crouched and moved quickly in the darkness. About 15 minutes later, there was a muffled sound in the distance as if something exploded in the tunnel or cave. After hearing this voice, Dalga immediately looked over and whispered, "It has started." Fang Linian also looked in that direction, but it was dark. He couldn't see anything only by the stars and moonlight in the sky, he could only see the trees waving. However, after 5 minutes, a muffled sound came again, and the ground trembled. Fang Linian said in surprise. What kind of monster are we dealing with? If that monster makes this movement, how big it must be? Dalga looked back at Fang Linian, wondering. You don't know the monster we are dealing with? Fang Linian shrugged and said. Of course. Dalga said. I forgot you are not our official member. I didn't get detailed information about the mission. The monster entrenched here is. At this point, Dalga's face suddenly looked serious. He pressed his wrist, then he said anxiously. Something went wrong, it's an emergency call. Han stayed behind. Wrench, bring a stretcher and come with me. After speaking, Dalga immediately took the folding stretcher from the vehicle and rushed forward with Fang Linian. This was a desert mountainous area, so the road was complicated. They must be very careful when walking. However, although the front was dark, a cold light stick was inserted every 6 meters to provide illumination in the place where the team passed, so it could still show them a way. After bypassing a large rock, Fang Linian saw the flares in front. Looking carefully, it was a team member who was using a flamethrower to shoot a 20-meter-long fire dragon to clean the front. It seemed that there was something like a rope struggling madly and painfully in the flame. But at this moment, someone hurriedly beckoned them. You are finally here. Hurry up. Dalga heard the urge and trotted quickly. Under the light of the distant flames, the black intercom on his wrist, with its own vibration function, could be seen. This was how he got the distressed message just now. After Dalga ran more than 10 meters away, he squatted down in front of a flat rock where 2 wounded were lying there unconscious. Dalga quickly took out an injection gun and gave the wounded close to him a shot. Fang Linian approached and took a look. He immediately took a deep breath, the goosebumps on his spine popped up one by one. Because he saw that half of the cheek of the wounded man was completely mutilated, it could only be described as melted. The first impression that Fang Linian had was a melted candle turned into a semi-solidified state again. Not only that, but a very strange and unpleasant smell exuded from his body, like the pungent smell of soapy water mixed with baking soda after heating. The wounded was lying there calmly before, but after being given a shot by Dalga, his breathing suddenly became quick. In just a few seconds, he twitched vigorously, and he screamed and rolled on the ground in agony. The rest of the people turned their heads to look back. Seeing this scene, Dalga was about to come forward to help, but Lucan had already half-kneeled beside him as if to comfort him. When the others were paying attention to him, he had already pulled the triggers on the wounded's chest. Amid the dull gunfires, the wounded man died after a few twitches, revealing a smile of relief. After the gunshot, Lucan looked at Dalga and said faintly. He was sprayed with the venom of the mutated poisonous python, and he is beyond help. If you are sprayed by it, you will probably be dead. Dalga said in shock. What? Didn't the information say that only mutated python is entrenched here? Lucan's face was very scary. Yes, so when I go back, I will definitely question those bastards if we can go back alive. Chapter 83, Titan Python. Just when Lucan was speaking, the ground suddenly shook. For a while, everyone couldn't stand firmly. At this time, someone could no longer consider hiding their actions and launch a flare into the sky. Fang Linian hurriedly looked over in shock. He immediately saw a rock mountain more than 100 meters away, and it started to rise slowly. When he took a closer look, his expression changed drastically. How was it a mountain? It was a huge snake head the size of a train. It had a purple forked tongue and ferocious eyes the size of a water bucket. Seeing this scene, Lucan and Dalga shouted at the same time. Titan Python! The most peculiar thing was that there was no panic in their shouts, but there was a hint of ecstasy. Then Lucan yelled. Fire at full force! I repeat again, fire at full force! When firing, be careful to avoid the position above its head, Dalga will mark it. Fang Linian took a breath. Why did Lucan issue an all-out attack? It meant that he had almost given up the follow-up mission. The ammunition supplies carried by the entire team were very limited. At this time, full fire would mean that there would be a lack of firepower after encountering mechanical creatures. Especially when encountering Purger, the lack of heavy firepower countermeasures even represented team wipe. As soon as Lucan's command was issued, Dalga immediately took out a weapon that looked like a mechanical recurve bow and aimed. A red dot similar to laser scanning was locked on the head of this titan python. There seemed to be a rock there. When Dolga pulled the trigger, a bullet similar to a cold light firework shot out, sticking on top of the rock. Then, it emitted blue light constantly. When the rest attacked, they would avoid this mark. After this huge monster emerged from its hidden mode, Fang Linian realized that instead of saying it was a snake, it was actually more like a giant lizard covered with thick scales. At the same time, Dolga had begun to check the information urgently. Fang Linian also learned some information next to him. According to the information, the mutated python that originally entrenched here were social creatures with two directions of mutation. One was evolving into a mutated venomous python, another was evolving into a large creature which was very rare. There were almost a dozen of mutated pythons in their population, but they wouldn't exceed this number. The mutated python with a large size, Titan python, was very rare. However, Titan pythons were often solitary. Once they were hungry, they would greedily swallow the surrounding creatures. However, it was really puzzling as there was a group of mutated venomous pythons around. When Fang Linian checked the information, the people around him had launched a fierce assault. Although this giant snake looked very large and powerful, after Lucan issued the attack command, the powerful firearm immediately burst out with amazing power. Who was the imaginary enemy when humans making the weapons? It was the mechanical creature with metal and steel as armor. Therefore, when designing, they emphasized the ability to tackle tough defense. The power was amazing. What impressed Fang Linian most was the rocket fired by Sergeant Wit. It was much smaller than the usual rocket, and the front end was much sharper. After it blasted out with a trail of light behind, it penetrated deep into the snake head and exploded. A quarter of the entire huge snake head exploded directly, the flesh and blood splashed around, exposing the white bones below. There was a layer of thick bloody mist immediately in the air. Fang Linian sensed a pungent smell in his nose, giving him an urge to vomit. This Titan python initially wanted to give some bloody lesson to these ants who disturbed its sleep, but it did not expect to suffer such a heavy blow. It immediately struggled on the ground in pain. Its thick tail whipped frantically on the ground, clashing the hard rocks into gravel powder. At this time, there was another person who was seriously injured. The hapless man had already been very careful to protect himself. He opened fire from a far distance. After the Titan python whipped the rock beside, lashed its tail on the rock next to it, a shattered rock smashed into his helmet directly. The helmet was instantly deformed, leaving a fist-sized deep dent. The soldier's body flew back and fainted right away. Blood bled out from his helmet. Even worse, the helmet was completely stuck on his head. Such a serious injury, he obviously suffered from shattered head, skull and brain concussion, which was probably beyond saving. Because of this, that Fang Linian immediately stayed away from the battlefield. He knew how bad his luck was. If he got one hit by this, wouldn't his story end here? So, he went to check the wounded immediately. Dolga had already carried out a simple treatment on the wounded. He injected him with a cardiotonic injection and fixed his neck. Fang Linian took the initiative to carry the wounded. Lieutenant Lucan glanced at him and nodded. He probably guessed Fang Linian's little thoughts, but considering that Fang Linian's value was still great, he turned a blind eye to it. Fang Linian trot all the way with the wounded on his back. After leaving for about 100 meters, he only breathed a sigh of relief. Under the pressure of life and death, he completely forgot that he was a total weakling. Now that his tensed mind was relieved, he felt a little dizzy. His heart was also palpitating vigorously, there was a nausea feeling in his chest. He felt that the wounded was getting increasingly heavy, almost making him faint. His breathing became quick and short as well. Under this situation, Fang Linian suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned around suddenly, but he found nothing unusual in the silent desert. Under the darkness, there were just rocks everywhere. Fang Linian took a deep breath, turned around and continued to carry the wounded forward. After walking for 3 meters, he immediately had a creepy feeling coming from the side. At this time, how could he care about the wounded? He hurriedly let go and threw him away, and he rolled to the side while pulling out the governor's roar and did a spincock. Immediately afterward, Fang Linian, who was in an aiming posture, saw a scene that he could hardly forget. A big snake with a brown-white texture bounced into the air, pouncing on the wounded at an astonishing speed and biting his neck. Chapter 84, Hunt. This big snake was almost 3 meters long. It had no scales on its body, just like Unagi and Loach, it only had some fluid and patterns on its skin. The skin on its head was very rough. Its two gleaming triangular eyes contained viciousness and mocking emotions. After biting the wounded's neck, it seemed to be still sucking blood greedily. Its stomach was bulging, and the white texture on its body began to gradually turn into bloody patterns. Not only that, its eyes were fixed on Fang Linian. Damn it, this should be the mutated poisonous python. How did this one escape? Fang Linian took a deep breath, he just felt chills on his back at this moment. If this mutated poisonous python targeted him first, he most likely wouldn't be able to dodge the pounce. However, judging from its bloodthirsty characteristic, it should be attracted by the scent of the blood of the wounded. So, as long as Fang Linian wasn't injured, the chance that he would be assaulted first was low. This monster was sucking blood at a strange speed. In just about 10 seconds, the body of the wounded man shriveled, his skin also began to loosen and wrinkle. The movement in its throat was also getting slower and slower, and its triangular eyes staring at Fang Linian also became more greedy and vicious. Suddenly, it let go of the corpse and pounced over once again by whipping the ground with its tail to accelerate. The tail of this monster was extremely powerful. When it hit the ground, the sturdy stone cracked. Its powerful strength was evident. What's more, the mutated poisonous python could even wiggle in the air, making it hard to be spotted. Fortunately, Fang Linian was also prepared at this time. When the monster pounced at him, he activated his talent ability, Bullet Time. Of course, he did not forget to immediately change the title of Scholar after activating. Suddenly, the feeling of being isolated from the whole world came to Fang Linian, even the breathing and heartbeat were clearly audible. The mutant poisonous python's movements were also instantly slowed down. Fang Linian squinted his eyes. His wrist was adjusted bit by bit, and the finger that pulled the trigger was tightened bit by bit. Governor's Roar's muzzle flashed, and dozens of irregularly shotgun shrapnel blasted out with a huge kinetic energy. This shot was calculated by Fang Linian. He waited until the mutated poisonous python pounced within 2 meters in front of him before firing. It got hit by half of the shrapnels, pushing it back for 4 meters. Not only that, although the passive special effect, knockback, was not activated, the stun special effect was successfully hit. The snake rolled several times after landing. It wanted to crawl over again, but it was shaking its head when moving forward like it was drunk. Obviously, it had been slowed down by 50%. At this time Fang Linian moved sideways while reloading. Although this guerrilla tactic was old-fashioned, it was very useful. But at this moment in a hurry, Fang Linian made a huge mistake. He directly used the conventional method to aim and fire after reloading the bullet into the magazine. However, after pulling the trigger continuously, he did not see successful firing. Instead, the trigger was making a click sound, then he immediately realized that it was necessary to use that special method to reload. At this time, the mutated poisonous python was about to recover from the slow state. Making such a mistake at this time could really be described in one word: fatal. Fortunately, Fang Linian was still in bullet time now, and his thinking speed was greatly enhanced. Facing the mutated poisonous python that had restored its crawling speed, he seemed to immediately make a seemingly unwise decision. That was turning around and fleeing, exposing his back to the enemy. Needless to say, this mutated poisonous python immediately chased after him. Its normal crawling speed was obviously faster than Fang Linian's running speed. Therefore, after chasing more than 10 meters away, it repeated its pounce attack again, and it bared its fangs to bite at his vest. At this moment, Fang Linian's eyes flashed, he stooped abruptly, grabbed something in front, and threw it behind him. In normal times, he couldn't have done so accurately, but he was still in the state of bullet time. The thing he sent out happened to fly into the mutated poisonous python's mouth. After throwing this thing, Fang Linian also immediately deactivated the bullet time, otherwise, if he delayed any longer, his spirit would be temporarily lowered, and there would be headache sequelae. What did Fang Linian throw? It was a human hand. Yes, it was the arm of the wounded who was sucked dry by the mutant poisonous python before. Undoubtedly, the wounded had already died, and he had almost become a mummy, lying dead on the ground. He of course would not have any opinion on Fang Linian using him as a shield. After the mutated poisonous python bit with all its strength, the 2 fangs on its front end penetrated deeply into the muscle tissue of the wounded's forearm. This was what Fang Linian wanted to see. Snake's unique way of eating makes its physiological structure different from other organisms. For animals such as humans, horses, cows, and dogs, when eating, their teeth have the function of chewing, rubbing, and smashing food. Therefore, the shape of the teeth is like a cutting knife. It is easy to let go after biting. But snakes are different, they eat by devouring. And snakes don't have claws that could help them hold down their prey. The only way to hold the prey so that they don't struggle is to entangle. Therefore, in order to make up for such shortcomings, the teeth of snakes often have obvious barbs just like a fish hook. Once it bit the prey, its teeth will go deep into the flesh, making it difficult for the prey to escape. However, it was this physiological structure that allowed Fang Linian to find an opportunity to escape from the current dangerous situation. The mutated poisonous python bit the shriveled hand, and its 2 long teeth were immediately plunged into the flesh. The cunning python immediately found out that it had attacked the wrong target. It pounced up again, trying to attack again. But here comes the problem. Its barbed teeth were now its biggest obstacle to pursue. After the mutated poisonous python shook its head desperately and pulled its teeth out of the flesh, Fang Linian had already spin-cock reloaded the shotgun and pointed it at the snake. Boom! Next, Fang Linian did not give this mutated poisonous python a chance. He even easily dodged the surprise venom shot. What a joke! When he saw the wounded's melted face, he had already known that it was caused by the venom. How could he not be wary of it? Chapter 85, Blood Orchid. Of course, Fang Linian's guard is one thing. The most important thing was that the venom shooting of the mutated poisonous python was not bullet shooting. It first had to stand up, open its mouth, aim, and finally spout poison. Such a series of steps was time-consuming. Even if Fang Linian didn't enter bullet time state, he would immediately dodge after seeing it standing up. It was definitely not easy to get hit by that. Under such circumstances, Fang Linian only fired 3 shots. This mutated poisonous python could no longer take more damage and wanted to run, but Fang Linian approached it and made another shot. It directly twitched on the ground, waiting for its own demise. After hesitating a moment, he walked up, held its neck, took out a knife, pried one of its fangs and threw the corpse into the trench below. The corpse was basically impossible to be found in the dark. Before dawn, those predators with sensitive sense of smell would follow the smell of blood and clean up the corpse in a short time. Next, Fang Linian had to deal with another trouble. He looked at the hapless dead corpse, sighed and carried it back again. After returning to the battlefield, Fang Linian found that the battle had come to an end. The huge titan python had collapsed to the ground, and the blood under it had stained the entire ground. It could still let out an angry and painful growl from time to time which would let anyone thought this was already a corpse. However, there were still gunshots from time to time, so it was just a matter of time before it died. It could be seen that Lieutenant Lucan was very nervous. He had rushed to the front to direct the battle. It should be that Titan Python had something he really wanted. At this time, Dalga noticed Fang Linian's arrival and walked over and whispered. "What's the matter?" Fang Linian smiled bitterly. "I'm very sorry." Dalga frowned. "What happened?" Fang Linian put the wounded down and said. "When I went back with him on my back, I was suddenly attacked when I was about to get to the vehicle." Then he talked about the attack he had encountered before. Dalga frowned and looked at the body of the wounded, then he said. "Where is that snake?" Fang Linian shrugged and said. "After the mutated poisonous python attacked, it kept biting him on the body. I used a shotgun to defend myself, so I didn't dare to shoot at all for fear of accidental injury. It then attacked me again, but after I blasted it back, it escaped right away." Fang Linian's illustration had no flaw. Dalga looked at the body of the wounded after listening to it, then he nodded and said. "Just stay here, don't act alone, I'll go and help them." About 5 minutes later, the Titan Python finally let out a stern wailing, then it died completely. When Fang Linian walked closer to take a look, he realized that the thing was really huge. Even if it collapsed on the ground, it was still a floor high. The corpse was as shocking as a mountain of meat. Its scarred forelimb giant claws could easily pinch a person to death even if they were placed on the ground. At this time, Lieutenant Lucan had cleverly climbed up Titan Python's body and came directly to the top of its head. It was the place where Dalga had previously marked it. There was also covered by thick deformed scales, showing a yellow color. This was really a perfect way of mimicry. If the Titan Python was lying still, it looked like a brown rock full of cracks which was enough to deceive anyone. What Lucan wanted was directly above the python's head. There was a small cluster of strange thing there. It looked like a succulent plant growing on the ground, then it produced a strawberry-like red fruit. The leaves of the plant were stubby and thick like aloe vera, showing the transparent color of emerald. The fruit was bright red and fresh, which looked juicy at first glance. People could imagine how the juice splashed when it was chewed. Looking down, the veins at the back of the leaves were bright red, and it was bulging slightly. There was blood flowing inside the veins, just like the capillary network of the human body. This was the secret of Titan Python's symbiosis with mutated poisonous python, and it was also the reason why Lucan changed his mind, ignoring the mission and issued an all-out attack. The thing that grew on top of Titan Python's head was an existence between animal and plant. It was called blood orchid. The relationship between it and Titan Python was symbiosis. Simply put, it was like leafcutter ants and aphids. Leafcutter ants protect aphids and even provide food for them. The dung of the aphids was the best food for leafcutter ants. With its plump and beautiful appearance, the blood orchid could lure many hungry birds for the Titan Python to feed on. After it bore fruit, the fruit would directly secrete a special pheromone, which would give a great temptation to the nearby mutated creatures. Titan Python did not need to go out hunting at all. It only needed to migrate once regularly, then waited for the prey to be delivered to its mouth. The blood orchid grew on the head of Titan Python. Its root system directly penetrated into the flesh of Titan Python's head to absorb nutrients, making it grow vigorously. The reason why mutated poisonous pythons could coexist with Titan Python here was that the temptation of the blood orchid would bring a lot of food to them. The full Titan Python would not hunt its own kind, while the mutated poisonous pythons could feast on the excessive food. After the scouts originally dispatched by Yangfan City came here, they encountered a mutated python that was lured by the blood orchid. This thing was also a tyrant in the desert. It had double horns on its head, and it was poisonous. Under normal circumstances, there would be no other large creatures in the area where it lived, not to mention it was even a mutated horned python. Its nature was even more bizarre and ferocious. Therefore, due to the limited conditions, the scouts did not dare to provoke the monster. After recording the relevant information, they immediately ran away. What they didn't know was that if they stayed for another 20 minutes, they could witness this mutated horned python being trampled to death and swallowed by the Titan Python. But why Lucan was very excited when he saw the blood orchid? It was because ordinary blood orchid was already a Type A item on Iron Fist Brotherhood's acquisition list. Their value was amazingly high. To put it more intuitively, the benefits gained after exchanging ordinary blood orchid would far exceed the loss after this mission failed. What's more, the blood orchid on Titan Python's head still carried fruits. It could even be included in the top acquisition list. The benefits could be imagined. Chapter 86, Human Mind. Lieutenant Lucan pulled out a chainsaw that had been prepared long ago from his waist, then he began to cut. The teeth of the chainsaw clashing against the hard bones were very horrible. The blood and meat residues were also sprayed out at high speed, splashing all over Lieutenant Lucan, but he wasn't bothered by it. Soon, he quickly saw off the blood orchid along with the snakeskin and skull bones underneath, then he put it in a special collection box and placed it in his military backpack. Seeing this scene, someone suddenly couldn't help saying, This is blood orchid's flower and fruit. Maybe it's a Type S product." Hearing these words, the rest of the people also stared at the backpack on Lieutenant Lucan's waist. Their breathing was a little quick and their eyes seemed to be scorching. Now we are going to mention the team's reward method. Strictly speaking, their organizational structure was also a mercenary model. Lieutenant Lucan picked up work from acquaintances of the Iron Fist Brotherhood and had the right to organize the team. He was responsible for recruiting his subordinates, then discussing the rewards in advance. After completing a mission, he would send out the money once. Some captains who did things openly would take out an extra bonus to split evenly among the team after the mission was completed. In this case, the blood orchid's flower and fruit actually belonged to Lieutenant Lucan's own trophies, so it was no wonder the rest of the people were jealous. After Lieutenant Lucan jumped from the huge snake corpse, he obviously felt that the surrounding strange atmosphere. He immediately took out his gun and shot twice in the air, then he shouted, "Assemble! I declare that the mission is over and we will return to the base. What are we standing here for? Maybe the big movement just now has alarmed the Reaper. Do you want to be taken away and kept as livestock?" The sound of the gunshot immediately shocked the people. Lieutenant Lucan was soaked with blood at this time. With his hideous appearance and the usual mighty presence, he held the scene immediately. The team immediately recovered their senses as they ran over, counted the numbers and carried the wounded members. Although they were still unwilling, the situation was under control now. At this time, the team quickly returned to the vehicle. Hans, who was waiting impatiently, saw them returning without knowing the specific situation, then he asked in confusion. What happened? Why did everyone retreat? Did the mission fail? Ah! It turned out that Lieutenant Lucan kicked him before he could speak, staring at him viciously. Shut up! Go and do your own work. Hans was also taken aback when he saw Lieutenant Lucan's body full of blood and murderous look. As he was about to ask a few more questions, Dalga dragged him over and said, Do not talk nonsense. Hans could only shut up honestly and got into the vehicle. Because most of the ammunition was used up, the inside of the car looked a little wider. Dalga started the vehicle and drove back. There was dead silence in the vehicle, no one spoke, and only heavy breathing could be heard. Probably because the atmosphere at this time was a bit awkward and dull, Dalga, who drove the car, said solemnly. I have bad news to tell everyone that the injured Pace, Anne, and Deng Ke have all died unfortunately. Dalga's original intention was to arouse everyone's sorrow and curiosity because Pace and Anne, who got sprayed by the venom, were hard to survive. They should be psychologically prepared. However, Deng Ke, whose helmet got smashed, should be able to survive. Logically, someone should immediately ask Deng Ke's cause of death. But Dalga overlooked one thing at this time. Everyone's mind at this time was basically focused on the amazingly valuable blood orchid's flower and fruit. Under this kind of impetuous human mind, these people simply ignored Dalga's death reports. Most of their thoughts were like this. What? Someone died again? Ah, oh. If they died, they died. How can there be someone who can't die? By the way, will we get a split for the blood orchid? After driving in such a silent and awkward manner for about 10 kilometers, the vehicle swayed and stopped slowly. Lieutenant Lucan was most afraid that things would escalate as time passed. He immediately yelled annoyingly at Dalga, who was driving the vehicle. What happened? Dalga also frowned being yelled at, feeling very displeased. He said coldly. Break down. When he said that, he opened the door and jumped out of the vehicle to smoke. The reason why this assembled car broke down was of course the trick done by Fang Linian during the last maintenance. He knew that he had to guard against everyone. This was a cruel and perilous apocalypse. He was very clear that if he lost his value, he would be abandoned as cannon fodder. Fang Linian was also good at observing the situation. Knowing that the atmosphere now seemed silent, but it was almost like the moment before the gunpowder keg was ignited. He should keep his presence as low as possible, so he immediately jumped out to repair as the vehicle stopped. Lieutenant Lucan felt very sulky, he could only kick on the tire with hatred. As soon as the vehicle stopped, the rest of course got off to flex their bodies. After all the vehicles in this world didn't account for the comfortability of the passengers. Seeing that his subordinates gathered together in small groups to smoke, whispered to each other and occasionally glanced over with greedy and secretive eyes, Lieutenant Lucan only felt more irritable. He wanted to scold him, but he found that even the deputy captain Dalga was sulkily smoking a cigarette next to him. If he really yelled, he would stand on the opposite side of everyone. As soon as Lieutenant Lucan thought of this, his heart suddenly chilled, an indescribable fear surged from the bottom of his heart. He swallowed the words that came to his mouth abruptly, and he began to recover his logical thought. Soon, Fang Linian repaired the vehicle, and the team got into the vehicle, but now, they all had their ulterior motives. Lieutenant Lucan was aware of the instability of the team at this time, so he planned to announce loudly that after returning to Yangfan City, he would hold a party for 3 days first, then he would let his subordinates enjoy a few nights with women. At least, he would give them something to look forward to. However, he was a little slower in realizing that. Before he spoke, someone already took the lead. It was Wit who spoke. This guy was a violent and straightforward person, and he didn't have any scheming, so he just said with anger. Boss, this time we followed you out with our lives at stake. This time, you are lucky enough to make a fortune that is enough to retire, but you should at least share us a little bit. Chapter 87, Suppress. After Wit started this, what else do the rest of the people have to worry about? All of them spoke at once. Some said that it was his credit, some tried to use emotion by saying how long had he been following the captain, some pretended to be miserable, some said he had a 80-year-old mom and... Of course, what troubled Lieutenant Lucan the most was that someone started to talk with data, saying that how much money could a Type S blood orchid sell. After that, he listed out the profits gained one by one. He was saying that it was just an estimation, but the data he gave was accurate to the 3 decimal places. This showed how dangerous his intention was. The stupid Hans even played a supportive role by the side as he kept asking. These people were gasping quickly due to the huge amount of wealth. The entire carriage was filled with a fanatical and strange atmosphere. After seeing this scene, Lieutenant Lucan sighed in his heart, knowing that the situation was completely out of control. He was not a person who wanted money desperately, so he quickly made a decision and closed his eyes pretending to be thinking. In fact, he had quietly reached into the satchel he was carrying and quietly fiddled with his hands. He decided to use money to calm the disaster if he had to. Even if he had money, he still needed a life to spend them. When these subordinates were almost done talking, Lieutenant Lucan shouted fiercely. Arguing for what? He looked around. Under his might, his sharp gaze suppressed his subordinates immediately, but Lieutenant Lucan also noticed the unwillingness and greed hidden in their eyes. He took a deep breath. He was about to give them the reward by announcing that he would take out 40% of the profit as a share to the team. However, just before Lieutenant Lucan spoke, a loud noise sounded. He flew back upside down as he heard someone said ambush, then his head knocked something and fainted. It was the Reaper M that Fang Linian had contacted previously that launched an ambush at the mammoth. This powerful motorcycle mechanical creature would constantly patrol a designated area. It was attracted by the sound of gunshots when the Titan Python was attacked, then it pursued the vehicle like a phantom in the night. When Fang Linian first entered the world, the Reaper M encountered by Fang Linian seemed to be relatively weak. In fact, it was because this thing had always wanted to catch Carls alive, so many weapons were not used. So, it gave Fang Linian an impression that it was just so-so. At this time, the Reaper M had already scanned the mammoth assembly car and determined that the threat of this target was very high, so it fired without scruples. This immediately caused great trouble to them. It first fired a Stinger missile which accurately hit the mammoth assembled car. The violent shock directly caused Lieutenant Lucan to lose balance and hit the steel beam besides with his head, causing him to bleed and faint on the spot. The team had now lost its backbone. Fortunately, a major feature of the mammoth assembled car was that it was sturdy. After this Stinger missile exploded outside of the vehicle, it just caused the car to shake violently while driving, taking off a few pieces of external armor. But after the Reaper M found that the target's armor was surprisingly thick, it immediately continued to attack and began to look for weaknesses on the vehicle. At this time, the bulk of the mammoth assembled car was a clear weakness to the agile Reaper M. After getting a few shots, black smoke started to emerge from the vehicle. Fortunately, at this time, the team members also awoke from the chaos of the sudden attack. According to the previous simulation, Wit directly climbed onto the turret on the top and began to fight back. The peculiar firing sound of the machine gun sounded. Not only that, the others also fired through the shooting holes next to them for intense suppressive fire. Facing such a fierce suppressive fire, the Reaper M was also hit several times in succession. Parts of the motorcycle front were blasted away, exposing the buzzing wires with blue electric light. Its movement was slowed by a bit, and its control wasn't that agile. After taking a few shots, the Reaper M immediately pulled away the distance from the mammoth assembly car. Everyone just breathed a sigh of relief at this time, thinking it was retreating. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden flash of spark in the darkness in the distance. A team member hiding behind the shooting hole immediately trembled, then he fell to the ground and died. Looking at his chest again, his blood spewed out frenziedly. The wound on his chest seemed to be the size of a finger, but the bullet that penetrated his back created a big blood hole. In the face of such injuries, treatment could only serve as a psychological comfort. It would be a miracle if the person could live more than 10 minutes in this state. Seeing this scene, a guy named Logan rushed up and searched for something on the wall beside. He took out a flashlight and found that there was a peanut-sized hole on the wall. It was emitting green smoke as well. Obviously, the Reaper M shot through the armor with a high-penetration weapon to kill the unlucky guy directly. Seeing this scene, Fang Linian was shocked, because he knew how sturdy the armor was. Not only did it have the same armor as an armored car, but it was strengthened by a layer of composite armor. In theory, even if it was hit by a tank's main gun, it was able to keep moving without taking much damage. However, it was now penetrated by one shot. What the hell is this? At the same time, after discovering that Reaper was coming, he also equipped the temporary title, Stark's Blessing. The damage he got from the mechanical creature would be reduced by 70%, but all other damages would be doubled. But judging by the power of this thing, even if it was reduced by 70%, Fang Linian's little body couldn't survive the shot. At this moment, Wit suddenly yelled at Dolga who was driving the car. Deputy Captain! Use the irregular route, the monster behind should be equipped with an Mr. Spiral rifle. The Mr. Spiral rifle was an extreme weapon. It could only perform predictive shooting, and the shooting interval was very long. To be simple, it was like the skill shot in MOBA, like Pudge's hook. Of course, with such a big shortcoming, the inevitable advantage was its explosive power. The bullet fired by this gun had a strong penetration and the shooting range was also very long. Even the run-flat tire would directly be abolished in one shot. Chapter 88, Schemed after a scheme. This was why Wit let Dalga use the irregular route. As long as the vehicle's trajectory became disorderly, the opponent's prediction was very difficult. Thus, the hit rate would be low. Dalga obviously understood this very quickly and naturally followed the idea. He sometimes braked and sometimes made an S-turn. This really increased the difficulty to the Reaper M aiming at the back, but the people inside the vehicle were also staggering left and right. Some got dizzy and some even bumped their heads. It was already hard standing still, and it was even harder to fight back. In this situation, Fang Linian held onto the railing next to him tightly, and he became anxious now. Fools! Don't you see that we have fallen into Reaper M's plan? If we dodge like this, it will directly reduce our speed by half. This car is not good at speed. Doing this kind of evasive action will inevitably slow down the speed. Mr. Spiral rifle shoots slowly and lacks accuracy. Its deterrence is greater than the actual lethality, but when this Reaper M waits until the reinforcements come, we really have no chance. This chase lasted for about 10 minutes. When running over a hill, the lights of Yangfan City could already be seen under the cover of darkness, and everyone's morale was greatly boosted. At this time, the moon also came out from the clouds, increasing the visibility of the surroundings. But at this moment, an unexpected incident happened very unfortunately. The vehicle suddenly bumped violently a few times, tossing the people inside, then it unexpectedly stopped slowly. There was also a strong burnt smell in the compartment. This was so fucked up. Faced with such a sudden condition, Fang Linian also cursed in his mind, because the breakdown at this time really had nothing to do with him, it was a real accident. Lieutenant Lucan was still fainting, and Dalga, who was driving, had already begun to shout loudly at this time. Listen to my order. Everyone immediately got out of the car and deployed the firepower in a fish-scale formation. Intercept the enemies behind with all means. Wrench and Hans, repair the car at the fastest speed. Follow me if you don't want to die. After finishing talking, Dalga had already drawn his gun and jumped off the vehicle, then he fired fiercely at Reaper M who was chasing after them. The rest were also veterans who had gone through numerous battles. They knew that if they did not unite to protect the people who were repairing the vehicle at this time, everyone would die here. In this case, they also obeyed Dalga's command. They began to jump off the vehicle, look for covers and fire. This group of people was well trained with tacit understanding, and the weapons they carry were mainly to deal with mechanical creatures. Under their cooperation, they immediately burst out with amazing lethality. The machine behind was caught off guard. Under the intensive firepower, Reaper M was emitting black smoke after being hit. However, it turned around and drove to the roadside swiftly, stirring up sands and dust behind its tail. Seeing this scene, everyone was relieved. The threatening feeling from behind gradually disappeared. To be honest, if they were not forced, who wanted to fight the steel monster head-on? If the opponent was damaged, it could make a comeback by changing a few parts. After a human got shot, even if he was lucky, he would have to stay in bed for at least half a month. If he was lucky, he would be disabled. If he was unlucky, he would become a eunuch. Now the external threat was eliminated, but they still had to wait for Fang Linian and Hans to repair the vehicle. They looked at each other, and the atmosphere gradually became more subtle. Needless to say, people began to put their minds on the blood orchid flower. Logan suddenly yelled, "Ah! I left my bottle inside, and I'm thirsty for some water." Then he turned and walked toward the vehicle, but just as he took 2 steps, Wit suddenly forced a cough too. What a coincidence, I'm also a little thirsty. Then he quickly stepped forward, caught up with Logan's footsteps, and climbed into the carriage first. The rest of the people looked at their actions. Some expressions were a little dazed, some frowned and began to worry, and some of them were more scheming and had already started to move toward the vehicle. However, in less than 10 seconds, there were several gunshots in the carriage. The rest of the people surrounded the carriage at once. But in the next second, everyone saw Logan rush out of the vehicle in a panic. Not only that, the pair of seemingly ordinary military skateboarding shoes under his feet spewed out 3 inches long flames, blowing the sand underneath. A layer of air shield was formed around the shoes. This pair of special shoes immediately boosted Logan's running speed. He ran for a dozen meters instantly. Just when everyone was at a loss, Lieutenant Lucan, who was fainted, staggered out of the vehicle while holding his head. He held onto the door and shouted anxiously and painfully. "Catch him!" He killed Wit and took the blood orchid. Everyone took a closer look and found that the backpack containing the blood orchid flower was really tightly held in the hands of Logan, and there was a commotion immediately. This could change the windfall of the rest of their life. Without waiting for the order, all the people chased over there with red eyes. Even Hans and Fang Lin, who were repairing the car, were no exception. No one cares about Wit's life or death. In just 1 minute, everyone was gone. Only Lieutenant Lucan, whose head was covered in blood, stood there holding the door. His expression was painful and distorted as if he would faint again at any time. However, after he slowly looked around, the expression on his face gradually changed, becoming contemptuous and ridiculing. He said in a low voice, "A bunch of idiots." After speaking, Lieutenant Lucan leaned down toward the back of the car with some effort as if looking for something. It could be that his action had hurt his wound. He bent only for a few seconds before standing straight and taking a deep breath. However, at this moment, a sentence suddenly came from a distance. "Old friend, hand over the things, I can let you live." Hearing these words, Lieutenant Lucan's body suddenly stiffened, and his expression was also very complicated. He slowly raised his hand, then he turned around and said indifferently, "What are you saying?" Chapter 89, Human Nature. At this moment, a dozen meters away from Lieutenant Lucan, there was a person standing with a gun pointing at him. This person was Dalga, the deputy captain, who usually submitted to humiliation under Lieutenant Lucan. At this time, he no longer had his previous decadent and aging appearance, and the gleaming light in his eyes reminded people of the cunning fox and insidious snake. After listening to Lucan's words, Dalga didn't reply at all, but he shot suddenly. His muzzle should have been equipped with a silencer. With just a slight sound, Lieutenant Lucan knelt down in pain. This shot had directly crippled his right hand. Not only that, Dalga strode forward and made another 2 shots, directly crippling Lieutenant Lucan's legs, then he said faintly, "Boss, don't pretend in front of me. Hand out the thing. How can a shrewd person like you let Logan take it away? He is clearly the chess piece you arranged." Lieutenant Lucan collapsed to the ground and cried out in pain. "What nonsense are you talking about? Everyone has seen that my bag with blood orchid was snatched by Logan." Dalga sneered. "You want to still deny? Don't forget, I was driving all the way, so I had already seen the trick you did from the rearview mirror. I used to seem to stand far away from the vehicle, but the angle of where I was standing can observe most of the movement in the compartment through the rearview mirror. You deliberately threw the backpack that seemed to contain the blood orchid in the middle of the compartment. As soon as Wit and Logan saw it, they immediately greedily grabbed it. At this time, you took the opportunity to kill Wit. After Logan successfully got the backpack, he was very flustered. His instinctive reaction was to run away, and your next 2 shots could obviously hit him, but you just shot the steel plate beside him like you were urging him to run away. So, the poor Logan had become your bait unknowingly, and he successfully attracted most of the attention. Speaking of this, Dalga took out a silver flat-shaped small hip flask, bottomed it up, and breathed out cozily. "Buddy, stop denying. I can take care of your son for the sake of our years of friendship, provided that you cooperate well. I saw it very clearly before. You packed the blood orchid in a square collection box and stuffed the backpack a little bulging. I can even see the outline of the collection box, and the bag that Logan got was obviously flattened. You know, I have another option, which is to shoot you in your head and search for it. But that will delay more time." The muscles on Lieutenant Lucan's face kept twitching. Matching with the bloodstains on his face, he looked even more hideous. He stared at Dalga and said, "Fine." After speaking, Lieutenant Lucan reluctantly sat upright with his left hand propped up, then he took out a box from the belt behind his back. It was the square collection box used to hold the blood orchid before. After seeing this thing, Dalga's eyes lit up immediately, but the first thing he had to do was not to reach out for the box, but to aim directly at Lieutenant Lucan's head. It could be seen that Dalga was also very cautious. He first chose to eliminate the danger, and then get the box. This way of doing things was really steady. Seeing that Dalga was so decisive, Lieutenant Lucan's eyes also showed hopelessness. However, every cloud has a silver lining. At this critical moment, there was a faint voice. Stop it! Dalga's pupils shrank suddenly and his shoulders moved slightly, but he heard a boom and felt a strong impact on his back. Even if he was wearing a bulletproof vest, he was knocked back to the ground. He lost the strength to hold the weapon in his hand and dropped it to the sand. After being stunned for a few seconds, he felt severe pain in his back, making his face distorted. When Dalga looked back, he saw Fang Linian holding the old-fashioned shotgun with one hand and aimed at him. The muzzle of the shotgun was still emitting smoke. Damn! Wrench, how could it be you? Didn't you go after Logan? How come you are here? Dalga coughed up blood and gritted his teeth. Although he couldn't see behind, he could felt that his back was mutilated. Bursts of severe pain indescribably came from his weak body. This damn wrench's old-fashioned shotgun is much stronger than the ordinary shotguns. Facing Dalga's questioning, Fang Linian sighed. Yes, I also went to chase Logan under the temptation, but after chasing for a dozen meters, I suddenly thought of something. I couldn't help asking myself two questions. The first question is, even if I catch up with Logan, can I grab the thing in his hand? The second question is, even if I get Logan's backpack, can I successfully bring it back to Yangfan City? I got the answers to these two questions in only half a second, so I simply returned. Unexpectedly, I saw this great scene. Boss is very good to me, I can't of course let you kill him. As Fang Linian said, he walked forward to search Dalga from head to toe and threw away all his weapons. Dalga looked at Fang Linian with unwillingness, resentment and remorse in his eyes. He suddenly gritted his teeth and said, Boy, do you know how much the thing on him is worth? It's money that you can never make in your life. You are willing to let the opportunity slip away like this? Besides, do you know what bad things Lucan has done behind us? At least a dozen of the brothers' pensions were embezzled by him. Lieutenant Lucan lost too much blood at this time, and he was already obviously weak. He said while gasping. You nonsense! You are slandering me! Fang Linian took a look at Lieutenant Lucan, then said. Boss, your injuries are very serious. I'll go get some bandages and medicines for you to stop the bleeding first. After he said this, he quickly helped Lieutenant Lucan up, letting him reluctantly lean on a rock next to him, then he handed the shotgun to Lieutenant Lucan magnanimously. Dalga is too treacherous, you watch him and be careful of his tricks. Facing Fang Linian's magnanimous behavior, Dalga was really dumbfounded. He was looking at him like looking at a fool. Lieutenant Lucan was also stunned for a moment, then he couldn't wait to take the shotgun, then he said righteously. Okay, you go. Leave it to me here. Chapter 90, I say. Fang Linian nodded, turned around with confidence and walked toward the mammoth assembled car, completely facing Lieutenant Lucan with his back. However, after he took 6 steps, there was a soft click behind him. At this moment, as if the entire time was frozen, there was also an indescribable awkwardness in the air. Then Fang Linian sighed slightly, turned around slowly, and saw Lieutenant Lucan holding the gun with his injured right wrist and pointed the gun muzzle at him. His left hand pulled the trigger with a face full of sneer and cruel expressions. At this time, he saw Fang Linian turning around unharmed, and he even pulled the trigger again with disbelief. After realizing that he still couldn't fire, he slowly put down the gun. His lips moved slightly, but he couldn't say anything. Ha 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 ha. Seeing this scene, Dalga, who was seriously injured in the distance, couldn't help laughing wildly. Interesting, it's so funny. I thought this kid was an idiot, but now it's you who seems to be the real idiot, Lucan. You have held the gun for a lifetime, but you actually forgot to unlock the safety before shooting. Fang Linian walked to the dumbfounded Lieutenant Lucan, reached out his hand to take his governor's roar back, and said faintly. Boss, I'm so sorry. I gave you a chance, but you didn't grasp it. The muscles on Lieutenant Lucan's face kept twitching, and he suddenly shouted. Kill me if you dare. You can't get the blood orchid fruit in the end. I already knew you bastards wanted my treasure, so I separated the blood orchid flower from the fruit in advance. Only I know about where the blood orchid fruit is hidden. Fang Linian leaned down, picked up the square collection box beside, opened it, and found that there was really only blood orchid inside. The red fruit was no longer there. Fang Linian smiled and said. I'm not greedy. I just need to live. It doesn't matter if I can't get anything out of this trip, let alone I have blood orchid now. So. Lieutenant, I'm sorry. Speaking of this, Fang Linian swung the governor's roar and made a cool spin-cock reload, then he pulled the trigger. Bang! Dalga was directly blasted away. At least half of the bullets hit Dalga's face, making him dead on the spot. Poor Dalga didn't understand why Fang Linian was so tolerant of Lieutenant Lucan even until the moment he died. At this time Fang Linian noticed a prompt popped up under his retinas, but he had no time to look at it at this time, so he ignored it. Seeing Dalga dying in front of him, Lieutenant Lucan suddenly had a very complicated emotion in his heart. Although he wanted to smash the body of this guy who betrayed him a few minutes ago, they had cooperated for years after all. The friendship honed between blood and fire was not just for fun. Lieutenant Lucan felt sad and painful. Of course, more of it was because they both would end up in the same way. Thinking that he would soon become a cold corpse, Lieutenant Lucan shuddered all over his body. He took a few breaths quickly, and said with difficulty, "Boy, let's make a deal." Fang Linian refused, saying, "Sorry, I don't want to trade with you. I have an advantage, that is not greedy. Captain, for the sake of being kind to me, I won't kill you, so just stay here honestly. The mechanical creatures are coming soon, I hope you can live until they come. Then, you will be stripped naked in the mechanical creature's cell and forced to feed every day. Just be a livestock honestly." After Fang Linian finished speaking, he stood up and turned around and left. His words were very high-sounding. In fact, the reason for not killing Lieutenant Lucan was very simple, that is, he was afraid of reducing the reputation of the Iron Fist Brotherhood that he obtained with difficulty. At the same time, he was also very clear about one thing. Sometimes, death was not the most terrible thing. Sure enough, Fang Linian had just taken a few steps, Lieutenant Lucan had completely collapsed in front of his threat. He shouted, "Don't go, don't go. Please help me, I don't want to be locked up by those damn steel monsters. I will tell you where the blood orchid fruit is, and then tell you how to go back safely." Fang Linian slowly shook his head and said, "I just wanted to save you, but it's a pity that your response was to kill me directly, so there is no more room to discuss." Having said that, Fang Linian went on to say in a mocking tone, "Actually, I followed in Dalga's footsteps a long time ago. The reason for showing up so late is of course that I wanted to choose to save you when it was at the most critical moment so that your gratitude can reach its peak. But now, all these are meaningless. What I want to express is that I came back very early, so I saw you bent down and looked under the vehicle for something. The way you said to go back safely should be hidden under the vehicle, right?" Hearing Fang Linian's words, Lieutenant Lucan suddenly stiffened, and then he said tremblingly, You. Sure enough, Fang Linian went straight to the position where Lieutenant Lucan was leaning on the body before, then leaned down to look for it carefully. This car was assembled by him throughout the entire process, so he was very familiar with it. He quickly found a hidden compartment, and it seemed to be locked. Fang Linian didn't want to waste time looking for the key, so he simply smashed it with rock. When he opened it, there was a backpack with a peculiar shape inside as well as necessities such as medicine and water. Seeing this scene, Lieutenant Lucan shivered more severely. He felt the god of death getting closer and closer. His bottom line was completely breached, and he couldn't help screaming. I will say it. The blood orchid fruit is behind the mirror in the driver's seat. Please help me. Please. I've been bleeding all the time." Seeing Lieutenant Lucan's gaffe, Fang Linian sighed slightly in his heart. There really is a big horror between life and death. Lieutenant Lucan had always appeared as a tough guy, but in front of death, he still quickly collapsed. However, Fang Linian suddenly thought of his despair when he was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. He had been insomnia due to the death threat all night. He couldn't help having a strange feeling of sympathy with the same disease, so he went behind the mirror and got the blood orchid fruit. After that, he took out the medicine from the medicine box, walked to Lieutenant Lucan and bandaged him. Probably because of a lot of blood loss, Lieutenant Lucan was trembling all over his body, his face was pale. The sound of teeth gritting could even be heard. Halfway through the bandaging of Fang Linian, he suddenly heard a series of explosions and chaotic gunfire from a distance. Upon hearing this sound, Lieutenant Lucan took a short breath and said, "They are here. The reinforcements called by the Reaper are here. Logan has more people on their side, so the reinforcements are focusing on that side, but they can't hold on for long. We have to hurry up." Chapter 91, Run Away. Fang Linian frowned and said, "Damn it, the car hasn't been repaired yet. Lieutenant Lucan struggled and said anxiously. This backpack is a high-tech product that I exchanged before. It is 2 grades higher than the pair of jet shoes Logan exchanged. It can't be mass-produced at all. It's called a jetpack. Take it on your back and take me away. Fang Linian put on the jetpack according to what Lieutenant Lucan said, then he pressed the button. The 2 pipes at the bottom of the backpack immediately ejected a powerful airflow, lifting him to half a meter from the ground. It could allow him to fly faster just above the ground. However, after Fang Linian carried Lieutenant Lucan, their weight made it hard to fly. It could still reduce stamina consumption and boost their speed greatly. When Fang Linian was running at full strength, with the assistance of a jetpack, it was like running under a low-gravity environment like the surface of the moon. Every step was a distance of 2 to 3 meters. Not only that, a jump could even leap for 5 meters. What's more, because they were moving straight most of the time, their speed was even faster than driving a car. However, after running several tens of meters, Fang Linian found it awkward to princess hug Lieutenant Lucan while running. First, his hands would be sore in this posture for a long time. Second, it was too unsightly for them to hug romantically like this. Therefore, Fang Linian decisively put Lieutenant Lucan down, moved the jetpack on his chest as long as the 2 jet tubes were still hanging at his feet, then he carried Lieutenant Lucan and moved forward again. After the 2 escaped for about 2 kilometers, they found that under the bright moonlight, the desert behind was already dusty. Several mechanical creatures were chasing them, one of which was the common Reaper M. The other one was obviously larger, its model should be Reaper M modified. After this thing was modified, its long-range attack abilities were replaced by powerful slave-catching abilities. It had its own sonic oscillator, stun bombs, electric whip, large-scale infrared scanner, etc. It was even equipped with complete medical equipment in order to avoid the death of the captives. It was worth mentioning that behind this Reaper M modified, there was also a huge black car with an eerie design. The car lights were emitting ghastly red light, and the car carriage was modified into several steel cages. This was a slave car that was specially used to carry captured human beings. Fang Linian found everyone in the team, or their corpses in the cage. In other words, with the exception of Fang Linian and Lieutenant Lucan, the entire team had been wiped out. Upon seeing this scene, Fang Linian began to give full play to his advantages and chose to escape to places with complex terrain as much as possible. Although most areas here were wastelands that could be passed by vehicles, there were also many rugged terrains that were not convenient for vehicles. Fang Linian's destination was a dry river in front. Reaper M behind him kept chasing and started shooting. The regular sound of bullets made them feel a chill on their spine. There was even a bullet brushed past Fang Linian's ear, only about 10 centimeters. He broke into cold sweat immediately. Suddenly, Lieutenant Lucan trembled and screamed. "Ah! I was shot!" Fang Linian didn't know what to talk for a while. Comforting him seemed to be gloating, but ignoring him seemed even more cold-blooded. After just a few seconds, Lieutenant Lucan trembled again familiarly, begging. "Can you hurry up, I got another shot in my ass." Fang Linian suddenly thought at this time that if he hadn't carried him on his back, then he would be the one who got shot. In this way, Lieutenant Lucan was blocking the bullets for him, so he hurriedly comforted. "It's fine. We can get rid of them in front." After running for more than 100 meters, the dry river was close at hand. The riverbank was more than 4 meters high. Fang Linian relied on the abilities of the jetpack to run quickly and jump down the river, then he shuttled between the big rocks at the bottom of the riverbed. Finally, in the last jump, the built-in engine of the jetpack was also at full power output. It roared hysterically as it pushed Fang Linian and Lieutenant Lucan to a height of about 5 meters. Then Fang Linian used one hand to support Lieutenant Lucan's buttocks, and the other hand grabbed the riverbank. With the help of the jetpack, he climbed up easily, taking Lieutenant Lucan with him to hide behind a rock. At this time, although the 2 Reapers had come to the opposite bank and the distance between them was less than 50 meters, the 2 Reapers relied on wheels to travel, so they couldn't travel in the river and climb up a 5 meters tall cliff. They could only watch. The 2 mechanical creatures stayed on the opposite shore for dozens of seconds, and the crimson-red electronic eyes on their bodies were constantly flashing. They should be assessing the possibility of driving down the dry river to catch people. Finally, they gave up, turned around and drove away. Fang Linian was relieved to see them go away, feeling a chill on his back drenched in a cold sweat. Because when he threw out Lieutenant Lucan, he heard the engine roar of the jetpack a bit abnormal. When he climbed the riverbank, he could smell a pungent burnt plastic smell from the backpack. Fang Linian pressed the switch several times. He found that the sound of the engine became weaker and weaker, and the wind of the jet pipes became weaker and weaker. So if these two damn Reapers choose to continue chasing, then Fang Linian was probably really going to face a very tricky situation. Although Reaper chose to leave, Fang Linian also felt that it wasn't good to stay here any longer. What if these two Reapers were just dithering instead of getting back? He immediately came to Lieutenant Lucan, put a hand behind his shoulder and said, "Captain, hold on, it's still dangerous here, let's get there first." At this time Fang Linian realized that Lieutenant Lucan was completely lying weakly on the ground, only his lips were moving slightly. Fang Linian was stunned. He took out the liquor from his private space and gave him a sip, then Lieutenant Lucan's face looked slightly red as if he got a shot of stimulant. He said with a weak voice, Wrench, I don't think I can make it. Blood orchid and blood orchid fruits are yours, both, they are all yours. After returning to the city, bring my dog tag too. Lieutenant Colonel Maven. Tell him that he doesn't have to repay the wine he owed. He can be trusted. Chapter 92, The Huge Scam Hidden in the Title. At this point, Lucan's voice was almost inaudible. He had to reluctantly put his ear to the edge of his mouth to hear some vague words. Money, please give a portion, to my little Kevin. Son. At this point, Lucan died. If there was an electrocardiogram monitor at this time, his electrocardiogram would show a straight line. At the same time, it also emitted an elongated beep. Fang Linian didn't feel sad about Lucan's death, this guy even wanted to kill him before. The reason why he had to take Lucan to run was of course not that he was kind and forgiving, but he was afraid that his Iron Fist Brotherhood's reputation would drop after breaking the relationship with Lucan. Now that he was dead, he had nothing to worry about. Therefore, he simply tore off the dog tag from his chest. After a brief search for valuable things, he stood up and strode toward Yangfan City. About an hour later, Fang Linian came to the outskirts of Yangfan City, and then he didn't plan to go any further. When there was no war, there would be almost no patrolling Reaper here. On the contrary, in such a late night, he might even be shot by the soldiers on duty because there were many cases of mutated creatures who broke into human settlements and killed everyone. So their vigilance was very high. They might not give him a chance to prove his identity. After checking the direction, Fang Linian was surprised to find that it was not far from the abandoned gas station where he had stayed last night, and this hiding place was quite hidden, so he simply walked toward it. After returning to the old place, Fang Linian quickly arranged the vocal traps around and cleared the place where he lay. Only then did he start to take out food and drink from the space to replenish his stamina. After all, he first fought a mutated poisonous python, then he ran for 10 kilometers. At least to his current condition, it was a huge stamina consumption. After gobbling for a while, Fang Linian sighed in contentment, then touched his belly and leaned against the stone next to him. A sleepiness struck him. However, he still forced himself to sit up straight because there were still 3 imminent things waiting for him to do. His principle was to not bring the matters to the second day. The first thing, Fang Linian opened the prompt under the retinas. After he killed Dalga with a single shot, a prompt popped out directly. It was just that there were so many things going on that he didn't have time to check. After clicking on it, a series of information entered his retinas. Number ZB419 contestant. You have killed 2 humans, milestone, murderer has been achieved. You got the title, murderer, enhanceable. Prompt, after wearing this title, all your damage to humans is increased by 10%. Prompt, after wearing this title, it may attract the hostility of certain characters in special plots, but it may also attract the favor of certain characters in special plots. Prompt, enhanced milestone, the murderer has been unlocked. When you kill 10 humans, it must include 5 human females or children, you can reach the milestone condition, so that the title, murderer can be successfully promoted to killer, which can increase all your damage to humans by 25%. Prompt, this milestone is unique and must be completed in this world. After seeing this series of explanations, Fang Linian was shocked at first. This was a 25% increase in damage, and it seemed that it could continue to be promoted. But when he saw the additional condition that it must include 5 human females or children, he immediately smiled contemptuously, knowing that this was actually a very big scam. If he was going to make this milestone, what awaits him was not a near escape, but a definite death. Why? Because even though the entire world was chaotic, Yangfan City still had the dominant ruler, Iron Fist Brotherhood. It had a basic stable human society. If he wanted to complete this milestone and killed 10 people that included 5 females or children in a short time, he would be wanted by the Iron Fist Brotherhood. Perhaps the perpetrator could escape the manhunt, but in such a high-pressure environment, could he continue to complete the following mission? It would be extremely difficult. Not to mention keep promoting this title. More importantly, Fang Linian noticed it in the 811 world. At the beginning of the last mission, the personality and behavioral patterns of the contestant in the world would even be evaluated. Although he was not sure that such a thing would happen in the joint trial this time, what if there was such an assessment? Then the problem was huge. Killing people in order to complete milestones that were not necessary, this personality and behavioral patterns assessment would definitely categorize this person with an evil chaotic personality. The main mission waiting for him, task tisk tisk. Fang Linian couldn't help but shudder after thinking about it. Of course, if anyone could survive from such a dead end, he must also be extremely terrifying. As for Fang Linian, of course he didn't want to try such a hell mode, so he simply chose to abandon the promotion of the title and began to deal with the second thing, the jetpack. This thing gave Fang Linian an excellent user experience. Therefore, although it was determined to be damaged at this time, Fang Linian, as an LV8 bench worker, was of course qualified to attempt to repair it. However, when Fang Linian disassembled the flight bag, he gave a long sigh. He saw that the structure inside the jetpack was already messy with burnt thread everywhere, giving off an unpleasant smell. It could only be described as the dormitory of college boys in the graduation season. Not only that, Fang Linian could see with his professional eyes that the inside of the jetpack would become like this was not an accident instead of a man-made disaster. When the jetpack was manufactured, they deliberately placed ignitable substances inside and even wrapped them together with the wires. Once the jetpack was operated at full power for several hours, the ignitable substances inside would be ignited. The interior of the jetpack would be in a mess. There was no way to repair it at all. The organization only made this thing to be a consumable item instead of an equipment that could be used continuously after repair. Damn it, Fang Linian had to give up repairing it dejectedly. However, thinking that the wreckage could still be sold for some money and he was not rich now, he kept away the wreckage of this thing. At this time, Fang Linian was a little frustrated and disappointed. He also yawned greatly. However, thinking that the last thing was not done yet, he forced himself to awake and took out the blood orchid's flower and fruit. What did he want to do with them? Of course, he wanted to use the temporary skill, reconnaissance, to appraise these two things. Chapter 93, Being dominated by the mystery taste. The description of reconnaissance was to identify the target. There was a certain chance of failure. Although blood orchid's flower and fruit seemed to be high-quality goods and the probability of identification failure was relatively high, good things must be sold to those who could appreciate them. Fang Linian must think to maximize the benefits, so he needed to identify the value of these two things. So, he activated this skill. A circle similar to a sight immediately appeared on his retinas. As his sight moved, Fang Linian put the circle around the blood orchid flower in front, and the circle began to shrink rapidly. A prompt popped up. Do you want to appraise this item? Your perception is 9 points, you will have a certain bonus to the appraisal success rate. If you continue, it will consume an appraisal opportunity. The current number of appraisals is 5/5. Your appraisal has a small chance of failure. Do you want to continue? Fang Linian simply chose yes, then another prompt popped up on his retinas. Appraising. Analyzing the item shape. Analyzing the item color. Matching. The data is being entered into the database. This item is 94.37% similar to the perennial herb, monocot plant, and the rare plant blood orchid, a specialty of Borneo. It is suspected to be a mutated plant, so it was named the mutated blood orchid. Mutated blood orchid, level B and item, which is highly toxic when taken directly. The world of origin is in great demand for this. It is suspected to be one of the main raw materials for the drug, Life Dewdrop, that is still under development. This drug can cause the greatest division of human cells which can extend a person's life to a limited extent. Looking at this prompt, Fang Linian's eyes suddenly widened. No wonder Iron Fist Brotherhood is very hungry for this stuff. This is so important. Under this circumstance, I think I should change the action plan I had made before. With such a huge benefit, it will cause a lot of temptation and coveting. People can do all sorts of crazy things under this huge benefit. He pondered for a while. He put the mutated blood orchid aside, then he picked up the blood orchid fruit and activated the reconnaissance again. Analyzing. Analyzing the item shape. Analyzing the item color. Matching. Appraisal failed. Your current remaining appraisal times, 3 times. Seeing this, Fang Linian almost vomited blood on the screen. What do you mean by fail? He looked at the blood orchid fruit for a while, and he still felt a little unwilling. He simply cast the reconnaissance on it again. Appraising. Analyzing the item shape. Analyzing the item color. Matching. Studying. The data is being entered into the database. This item is the fruit of the mutated blood orchid. The reason why the mutated blood orchid is rare is because it is a dioecious plant. The female plant needs the pollen of the male plant to successfully produce fruit, but the chance of the male and female plants of the mutated blood orchid meeting is really low, so its fruit is unusually rare. The fruit of the mutated blood orchid, level A item. It can be taken directly. The World Story Force in the place of origin has only obtained one before. Its specific effects have not been developed yet, but it is also offered at a very high price. Consume this fruit directly will grant the user 1/5 basic attributes points that are randomly allocated to their basic attributes. At the same time, it can also strengthen an additional physical attribute. Warning: this item is only valid for contractor/contestant. Seeing this series of explanations, Fang Linian suddenly lit up. Survivability. What I need most now is survivability. At this time, his stamina was at 3 points, and his 30 HP was horribly low. Any damage could put him in severe injury. Without enough HP to support him, he could do nothing. If his stamina was increased by 5 points after eating the fruit, wouldn't it be the best case scenario? Therefore, Fang Linian grabbed the fruit of the mutated blood orchid and threw it into his mouth without hesitation. The fruit looked very good, which looked similar to a combination of strawberry and wax apple, and it smelled fresh, so Fang Linian was looking forward to it. He just happened to finish his meal just now, so it would be a dessert after a meal. This fruit looked plump and juicy, and the skin seemed to have only a thin transparent layer. But when he chewed it in his mouth, it was actually quite tough and elastic. No matter how Fang Linian chewed, it would break. But a faint fresh taste had spread in his mouth, so he bit it hard. With a soft pop, the fruit finally burst directly in Fang Linian's mouth, and the viscous milky white liquid instantly filled the upper and lower mouths. It was a silky enjoyment. Fang Linian closed his eyes while happily enjoying the taste. His eyes suddenly widened in the next second, blue veins on his neck burst out, and his whole body trembled. Wabababa. This, what the hell is this? The smell of this shitty fruit, why does it taste like semen? Help! It's so bad. I really want to spit it out. But if I spit it out, will I get the attribute points? I really want 5 attribute points. I want stamina gar. I can't vomit. I have to hold on. Hiccup. Hiccup. 10 minutes later, Fang Linian slumped on the ground with a grey face. His face turned green. He held a pot of water in his hand, taking a sip every few seconds, gargled a few times and swallowed it down. He also cleared his throat from time to time. Finally, a prompt popped up on his retinas. You successfully consumed the fruit of the mutated blood orchid. Identity verification: your identity is a contestant. No. Contestant ZB419, because of the fruit of the mutated blood orchid, you get a 12% permanent increase in movement speed. This bonus increases in movement speed is equivalent to 20 points of agility. No. Contestant ZB419. Because of the fruit of the mutated blood orchid, you have obtained 4 free attribute points which have been randomly assigned. Please check it yourself. At this time, Fang Linian suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. He opened the basic attributes column as quickly as possible, and he suddenly wailed. It turned out that, out of the 4 free attribute points, 2 were added to strength, perception and spirit, both got 1 point. The stamina he was most looking forward to didn't even get a single point. With strong unwillingness and resentment, Fang Linian poured himself a sip of water, rinsed his mouth and fell to the ground, and soon fell asleep. After all, he was really exhausted this day. Of course, this dreamland still had a peculiar taste. Chapter 94, Second Phase. After falling into a deep sleep, Fang Linian suddenly felt something was wrong, as if something big was destined to happen. He had an indescribable feeling. Then, Fang Linian's retinas popped up the following information. Each word was in blood red and large font. It's now, Yangfan City time, 3:17 and 14 seconds AM. Every contestant, the easiest adaptation time has passed. Joint trial, the first phase is over. Joint trial, the second phase is officially started. You have obtained the main mission, the symbol of Steel Fist. Mission introduction. The ruler of this city is a powerful organization called Iron Fist Brotherhood. They have a set of effective ways to manage the city, including the provision of exchange agencies that can let some peripheral members exchange some advanced equipment or technology. Mission content: successfully redeem one of the Type B equipment/item of Iron Fist Brotherhood, and hold it for 10 minutes. Mission explanation: this is not an easy mission, so you can consider whether you want to seek the help of others. In a cruel world, it is normal to form a team. Those who stick to their own rules are often eliminated the earliest unless you have superior strength. The faster you complete the mission, the higher the reward you will get. Warning: this main mission has a limit on the number of people who can complete it. Only the first 80 people can complete this mission. After the number of people has reached the limit, this mission will be officially closed and enter the third phase. If during this process the number of remaining contestants in the world is less than 80 people, then it will go directly to the third phase. When Fang Linian saw the mission content of the main mission, a strange feeling suddenly emerged in his heart, and he couldn't help but look at the wreckage of the jetpack next to him. Holy fucking shit, could this thing be one of the Type B equipment/item of the Iron Fist Brotherhood? Does it still count if it's damaged? So he waited for 10 minutes with the damaged jetpack, and he found that nothing happened, so he shrugged helplessly. This mission is very clear. It seems to be very difficult. It even recommends the contestants to team up to finish it, but where do I find a team? But, for me, it doesn't seem necessary to form a team. After thinking for a while, Fang Linian only felt sleepy, and he fell asleep again. This sleep lasted for 5 hours. When he woke up, the sun was already shining. The sunlight even shined through the cracks on the ground, the shadows seemed very mottled. After Fang Linian woke up, he wiped his face hastily, pinned the badge he got from Lieutenant Lucan to his chest, made some arrangements, and then went to Yangfan City. With a badge to open the way, Fang Linian entered the city unimpeded. At this time, Yangfan City was still that dirty, messy, and full of vitality. Entering here for the second time, Fang Linian was already familiar with this place. No one thought of where he went this time. It was neither the headquarters of the Iron Fist Brotherhood, nor the Lieutenant Colonel Maven that Lieutenant Lucan said before he died. Why didn't he go directly to the headquarters and exchange directly? Because Fang Linian felt that he most likely couldn't get in by himself. Even if he got in, taking out Blood Orchid abruptly would only be scammed. Such a weakling, it would be a crime to not bully him. He couldn't pin his destiny on the character of the exchanger. There were even more reasons not to go to Lieutenant Colonel Maven. First of all, it couldn't be ruled out that this was a huge scam. He got Lieutenant Lucan's spoils, so who Lieutenant Lucan hated the most? It must be him. A narrow-minded person would even think that, if it weren't for you bastard, how could I fuck up here? Maybe I will be drinking wine and having fun with my lover in the red light district of Yangfan City. With this kind of mentality, it would be weird if Lieutenant Lucan didn't set him up. Secondly, even if what Lieutenant Lucan said is true, so what? Lieutenant Colonel Maven was his best friend, but he didn't have any friendship with Fang Linian. If Fang Linian really handed in Lieutenant Lucan's dog tag and Blood Orchid flower like a retard, Lieutenant Colonel Maven would inevitably think righteously, this thing cost my brother's life. Now that he is dead, I of course have to take care of his wife and son. This thing belongs to his son, and I'm his son's guardian, so I of course should take care of this thing. This kind of damn logic sounded weird, but if Fang Linian went to Lieutenant Colonel Maven alone and was pointed at Lieutenant Colonel Maven's subordinates with guns, he could only let it go with a laugh and say, "You old man is really a true friend." Because of this, Fang Linian decided to use his own way to get this thing done. His destination this time was the same maintenance base that he visited yesterday. He and Hans stayed here for several hours yesterday afternoon, and their work also attracted engineers to come to watch. One of the guys, Marquin, left a very deep impression on Fang Linian. Ahem, not because his skills were good, but his skills were completely fucked up. He was also an arrogant person. The rest of the people didn't want to bother him at all. Fang Linian asked Hans to find out that Gundam, Marquin's uncle, was the supervisor of the maintenance base. He won the trust of the superior and he was promoted to the rank of colonel not long ago. Although he had a wife in his early years, she died due to an accident. After she died, he was single for the next 20 years, so he was very fond of his nephew. It was no wonder Marquand was so arrogant here. Since then, Fang Linian had been paying attention to him. When others saw Marquand as a plague, he would take the initiative to talk and make friends with him. Marquand was arrogant, but he could still tell the good from the bad. Fang Linian's skill was obviously quite excellent, so he was a valuable person. Therefore, he also talked with Fang Linian. The two could still talk well in this situation. Because of this relationship, plus the badge on the chest, and of course the 5 copper coins secretly stuffed with the guard, Fang Linian was able to once again come to the maintenance base. He saw Marquand easily. After the two chit-chat for a while, seeing that no one was around, Fang Linian leaned forward and said straightforwardly, "I came back this time because I actually have something very important to Colonel Gundam." Chapter 95, Negotiation. Hearing Fang Linian's words, Marquand was shocked. Because as soon as he met his uncle, he either scolded him or forced him to work in the workshop. Unless he was short of money, he would never go to his uncle. But before his refuted, Fang Linian had already preemptively thrown a platinum coin on the table and said, "It doesn't matter whether things happen or not, it's your reward." Then he lowered his voice and said, "Remember the modified car yesterday? Later we went out to perform the mission, and something big happened. Because I have a new face, it is not easy to attract attention, so Lieutenant Lucan sent me back especially. This is a token he gave me. He said that there is a big business with more than 1,000 platinum coins to talk to Colonel Gundam. If it succeeds, I can give you a bonus of 20% platinum coins." 20%. Marquand trembled. He calculated in his mind, and his body trembled all over. "Isn't that 200 platinum coins?" "Yes." Fang Linian said simply. Marquand suddenly said, You can't fool me." Fang Linian shrugged helplessly. "First, do I look like I'm free? I'll use a platinum coin to fool you? Second, do I think I live long enough to joke about your uncle?" Marquand thought for a while and thought it was right, and he said to Fang Linian, "You wait here, I'll go and ask immediately." In less than 3 minutes, Marquand came back with a sad face. "My uncle was very angry, he said he was not here." Fang Linian sighed. "You go to him again and say I'm carrying blood orchid flower. If I can't bring out the blood orchid flower when I go in, your uncle can just shoot me to death." When such cruel remarks were said, Marquand, who was quite depressed, was also stunned, then he walked in again. Soon, he returned, beckoning to Fang Linian. Following in Marquand's footsteps, Fang Linian came to the outside of a rough office. 2 sturdy guards stood at the door. The guards had obvious black cross marks on their chests. They reached out to stop Fang Linian. Although at the entrance of the office, he could see a deer head specimen hanging on the opposite wall, a bear skin was spread beside the coffee table in the next living room, and the other wall was a firearms exhibition room. There were dozens of unique styles of firearms arranged on the wall. It can be seen that each one had been carefully taken care of. Colonel Gundam sat arrogantly opposite the desk. The old man was taking a deep sip of a thick cigar, letting the faint blue smoke circulate in his respiratory system for more than 10 seconds before exhaling it comfortably, then he put the cigar on the ashtray beside. He had a huge nose, a cold face, full of energy, and a burly body. Although his hair had mostly turned white, he was as domineering as a polar bear sitting in its lair. His eyes were even more fierce and greedy, as if he would peel off people's skins. There was also a young and beautiful female secretary standing beside him. She had crooked eyebrows. Although this woman was wearing a military uniform, the first thing that people would think of in their minds was the bed. Colonel Gundam took a careless look at Fang Linian outside the door, then he continued to look at a yellowed photo in his hand. The content of the photo seemed to be a family portrait, then he was immersed in memories. After a full 5 minutes, he picked up the cigar next to him. After seeing that it was finished, he beckoned Marquand, who was standing next to him, and Marquand trod over immediately. But after Colonel Gundam grunted from his nose, Marquand slapped his head as he suddenly realized it. He took out a black box with the Iron Fist Brotherhood logo on it and gave it to his uncle directly. Colonel Gundam nodded in satisfaction, opened the box, put the yellowed photo and the half of the cigar in it, and finally locked the box with a click. During that short period of time, Fang Linian had peeped that the box seemed to be quite heavy. A specific area was marked out to place the yellowed photo, and the rest were all long strips of dents. Most of them were empty. There were only 3 cigars plus the half cigar that had just been put in. The box was actually locked with a combination lock. Colonel Gundam gently stroked the surface of the box, and he said seriously to Marquand, "You must remember that this box contains my most precious treasure, the 2 favorite things in my life, cigar and family, are in it. If one day I die, you must bury it with me." Marquand shrugged and said helplessly, Okay, uncle, you repeat similar words every few days, I can already memorize them." When Marquand was speaking, he looked at Fang Linian outside with an inquiring expression in his eyes. Colonel Gundam snorted impatiently from inside his nostrils, sat up a little bit, and then pointed at the guards at the door and nodded. The 2 guards saluted to Colonel Gundam silently, then they directly searched Fang Linian up. Finally, they took out a fist-sized box from his arms and let him open it to see what was inside. Fang Linian simply opened the box and revealed the item inside. Colonel Gundam's eyebrows immediately twitched. "This is the blood orchid flower you are talking about." It turned out that in the box in Fang Linian's hand, it was a leaf of a crystal clear and plump blood orchid flower. Fang Linian smiled slightly in the face of the questioning. "This is just to prove that I didn't lie. As for the rest, they are kept in a very safe place. As long as we make a deal, they can be delivered in minutes." Colonel Gundam beckoned. Marquand immediately handed the blood orchid flower leaf in Fang Linian's hand. Colonel Gundam looked at it carefully, then closed his eyes and thought for a while. "Then what's your intention?" Fang Linian sighed and began to fabricate his own story. Oh no, it should be the story told after processing under real events. It was nothing more than they went to perform the mission, but the intelligence was wrong, so they encountered a titan python, killed it and got the blood orchid flower. However, they had to give up on the following mission. At this time, they were chased by Reaper on the way back. Lieutenant Lucan was seriously injured. As a result, Deputy Captain Dalga became ill-intentioned. He led a few cronies to try to snatch the blood orchid flower. After the 2 sides fought, Dalga and the others had the upper hand, only Lieutenant Lucan and him managed to escape. Because Dalga was very aware of Lieutenant Lucan's interpersonal contacts, Lieutenant Lucan's network of connections couldn't be used. Dalga would probably closely monitor the exchange place and the people that Lieutenant Lucan may go to. Once he showed up, he would easily be set up. After this incident, Lieutenant Lucan was also discouraged and wanted to take a large sum of money and start a new life far away, so he could only entrust Fang Linian to do this. Fang Linian hoped to exchange blood orchid flower for what they need. The 2 leaves of blood orchid flowers were the handling fee they gave to Captain Gundam. In order to prove his words, Fang Linian also took out Lieutenant Lucan's dog tag as a token. After listening to Fang Linian's words, Colonel Gundam tapped lightly on the table with his knuckles. After a while, he said, "What do you want?" Fang Linian said, "I need to look at the list of equipment/items that can be redeemed in Iron Fist Fortress today before I can tell you." Colonel Gundam said, "Then what can I get?" Fang Linian said, "Blood orchid has 6 leaves, and you can get 2. Colonel Gundam said, "Then the last leaf, you will only give me in the last trade." Fang Linian said, "Yes, I admit that you have a considerable amount of risk, but sir, you now have a leaf of the blood orchid flower, so it is already worth it." Colonel Gundam said coldly, "But, I want more." Fang Linian said, "Of course you can, but you have to pay the contribution points for the things we need." Colonel Gundam said coldly, "No, I prefer to pay the bill with bullets." Fang Linian shrugged and said nonchalantly, "Sir, you are our best choice, but it is definitely not the only choice. If I don't go out in another half an hour, Lieutenant Lucan will go directly to Lieutenant Colonel Maven. In his eyes, my life is worthless. Taking risks is better than losing everything. Of course, you can also take a bet to see if you can catch Lieutenant Lucan, but to be honest, your chances of winning the bet are not high." Colonel Gundam took out a cigar from the drawer beside, and he took a deep breath after lighting it. His eyes were as greedy and cold as a brown bear in winter seeing its prey. "If you want me to help, in addition to the 2 blood orchid flower leaves as a handling fee, I also want the root of the blood orchid flower. And, you have to give it to me at the first trade." Fang Linian shook his head and said, "I can't decide on this. I have to discuss with the lieutenant." Can you first give me the list of equipment/items that can be exchanged today? Also, Colonel Gundam, although we are asking you now as a weaker party, we also have our own bottom line. Once we realize someone is following us, then this trade will simply fail. Colonel Gundam stared at Fang Linian tightly with his grey pupils. Boy, you are really courageous, you dare to speak like this in front of me. Fang Linian said calmly. That's because I know that before you get the root of the blood orchid flower and the remaining leaves, I am safe. I am the one who can bring you wealth. And this wealth is enough to make the devil be jealous that its eyes fall out. Colonel Gundam snorted coldly. He first reached out and fetched the box containing the blood orchid flower leaf in Fang Linian's hand, then he handed it to his confidant, asking him to check the authenticity of the blood orchid flower immediately. Then Colonel Gundam rang the summoning bell on the desk and called in a guard waiting outside. Colonel Gundam whispered a few words to him, and this person also went out to do errands. After waiting for less than 10 minutes, the guard returned and brought back a handwritten list, which he handed to Fang Linian. This is what you want. Fang Linian opened it and looked at it, and found that only a few lines of scribbled fonts were written on it, and he suddenly said in amazement. Why is there only so little? Colonel Gundam sneered at his question. He pointed at his nephew Marquin with his carrot-like fat finger. You even ask such a stupid question? Tell him. Marquin explained the key to Fang Linian. It turned out that in the contribution point exchange office of Iron Fist Brotherhood, E&D items and equipment were all fixed mass production systems. This part of the list was very clear to Lucan himself and they were not expensive, so they were excluded. Items and equipment starting from Type C could be understood as a limited edition. After being bought, the replenishment process was complicated and the interval was long. Therefore, what was listed on this list was a list of Type C and B items. As for why there was no Category A, the explanation was very simple and straightforward. After deducting the rewards, the remaining blood orchid flowers were not enough to exchange for equipment and items above Type B. Fang Linian was speechless. After all, contribution points were needed to exchange items. This was something that was difficult to buy with money. After knowing the cause and effect, Fang Linian excused that he could not decide on his own and had to discuss with Lieutenant, so he went straight out and went into a cafe called Desert Camel beside. It was a coffee shop. In fact, there was only one type of coffee and it was surprisingly expensive. The two main drinks sold were cactus fruit tea, and the herbal tea Jijisang made from a common herb that could be found nearby. Cactus fruit tea was considered a mid to high-end beverage. There were crystal clear ice cubes and purple-red cactus fruits in it, and it looked tasty. Jijisang was aimed at the low-end crowd. A copper coin could buy one big cup, and it could be refilled for free. It was directly scooped out in the boiling pot next to it. It was yellow-green in color, and there were many muddy grass roots in it. Some people drank it directly as vegetable soup or traditional Chinese medicine. The sweet aftertaste made it very popular. After arriving in the cafe, Fang Linian went directly to the second floor where the environment was good and quiet. Then he ordered cactus fruit tea, he tilted his legs and began to slowly look at the exchange list. Type C items, the cost of contribution points was between 50–100 points, was as follows. 5 ppk hybrid engines, 2 remainings. 40 tons of diesel oil, need to be picked up, 6 tons were exchanged. 10 nickel iron alloy ingots, 10 remainings. 20 B-Sting variable frequency directional rockets, 0 remaining. 3 all-terrain armored motorcycles 500 cubic centimeters, 1 remaining. 5 battlefield first aid medical kits, contains cardiotonic needle X5, anesthetic X2, medical alcohol X1, stimulant X3, 2 rolls of bandages, 3 remainings. Peeling mustard tuber, 1 package left. Chapter 96, Undercurrent. Type B items, the cost of contribution points was between 100–200 points, was as follows. Herbal tea egg, half. This is an extremely precious food. It is said that many people have never tasted half of it in their lives. 2 pieces of Kevlar fiber combat suits, this is a piece of clothing with a very excellent defense. It can greatly increase your chances of surviving, but it may not be a lucky thing to fall into the hands of mechanical creatures alive. 1 piece had been exchanged. 3 black EMP shock grenades, 2 have been exchanged. This grenade can release powerful electromagnetic shock waves, paralyzing mechanical creatures in the surrounding 60 square meters, 7 seconds, but the effect was very poor for models above Reaper. It may even be ineffective. 1 jetpack, this is a powerful auxiliary tool that can provide you with amazing mobility. After you carry it on your back, it can provide a powerful boost to achieve the effect of low-altitude flight. However, it must be noted that once the continuous use time exceeds 20 minutes, there will be a certain probability of failure. High-frequency alloy gun, 20, refreshed daily. This is a new weapon developed for mechanical creatures. Once the gun is pierced into the body of the mechanical creature, a current of up to 10,000 volts will be released instantly, causing a strong internal damage. But this weapon can only be used with high-frequency harpoon guns and Raven charging system to achieve the most perfect effect. 11 have been exchanged. The Porcupine depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition, 1,000 rounds. It is regularly refreshed every day and is sold at 200 rounds per unit. This is ammunition made with the latest technology and has a powerful lethality to mechanical creatures. 400 rounds have been exchanged. Magway Deluxe Wine, 5. A specialty of this city. It can give the drinker an excellent taste experience, and the effect will be better after frozen. The contribution points needed are as follows. Looking at these dazzling products, the first thing Fang Linian discovered was the all-terrain armored motorcycle 500 cubic centimeters. The exchange price of this thing was astonishingly low, and it was only 50 points. Such a cheap price really gave him an urge to buy immediately. But after Fang Linian thought clearly, he immediately noticed the scam in it. For a motorcycle with a displacement of 500 cubic centimeters, the fuel consumption is just like drinking water. Does this cost of replenishment worth it? When this thing encounters a malfunction during driving or it is damaged in the middle of a battle, will you fix it? Vehicles that operate in harsh environments require maintenance every once in a while. Can you do it yourself? If I buy it due to its cheap price, I will find that I need to spend money everywhere to make it work properly. Iron Fist Brotherhood may be selling motorcycles at a loss, but needless to say, the money lost can be earned back from the rest in minutes. Next, Fang Linian saw the description of the jetpack, and he was immediately shocked. There will be a certain probability of failure. Dear Daddy opened it and saw it personally. This chance is 100%. Therefore, after Fang Linian pondered for a while, he directly chose 10 tons of diesel, Kevlar fiber combat suit, jetpack, and Porcupine depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition, 200 rounds. Among them, both diesel and Porcupine depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition required a total of 100 contribution points. The price of the Kevlar fiber combat suit was 150 points, and the jetpack only needed 100 points. The total was 450 contribution points. For him, diesel and Porcupine depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunitions were just a smokescreen. What he really wanted was the jetpack and the Kevlar fiber combat suit. After thinking about it in his mind, he finalized the following plan. He walked out of the coffee shop and walked over to the maintenance base again. When Fang Linian went out, Colonel Gundam here had already received a report saying that the target had left the coffee shop. It seemed that he had negotiated with Lieutenant Lucan, but intelligence showed that no trace of Lieutenant Lucan was found. No suspicious person even had contact with Fang Linian. Hearing this news, Colonel Gundam was also very shocked. Of course, he had sent someone to monitor Fang Linian's whereabouts, but he ordered that it must not be discovered. They just had to watch from a distance. In fact, Colonel Gundam was very confident in his own people and felt that he would be able to find Lieutenant Lucan's whereabouts. However, Fang Linian just sat in the coffee shop for half an hour, and he was able to contact Lieutenant Lucan successfully. He also seemed to have the root of the blood orchid flower when returning. Such an anti-reconnaissance ability made Colonel Gundam vigilant. He even considered the possibility of a huge force behind Fang Linian. He didn't know that Lieutenant Lucan was dead. His corpse was probably taken back by Reaper long ago to extract minerals. Fang Linian put all the valuables in his private space, so they of course couldn't find anything. When the two sides met for the second time, Colonel Gundam was still very careful. He let people search Fang Linian before letting him in. However, this time Fang Linian simply grabbed the box and refused to let go, and he told Colonel Gundam that he would smash the box with a squeeze. The special liquid inside would completely destroy the blood orchid flower root inside. Colonel Gundam must trade it with items. Colonel Gundam faced Fang Linian's determination and felt a headache. This old treacherous fox used both soft and hard tactics, but Fang Linian insisted that this time he must follow his own rules, otherwise both parties would get nothing. In this case, Colonel Gundam finally gave in because he really couldn't resist the temptation of greed in his heart. He could only grit his teeth and said, "What do you want?" Fang Linian immediately stated the list of what he needed, and he finally added 800 grams of titanium silver powder. This thing was an expensive additive that could be used in many aspects of metal forging. In this apocalypse, it was a hard currency similar to gold that could be easily traded. This was in line with Lieutenant Lucan's motive of getting a fortune and running away. Colonel Gundam snorted coldly after listening to Fang Linian's condition. "Boy, do you think that a mere blood orchid flower can be exchanged for the entire world?" Beginning with this sentence, the two began a fierce quarrel. The intensity of the process during this period was exactly like Mars hitting the Earth, Kardashian met Hilton, etc. The debate was full of the essence of guerrilla warfare. Finally, they reached an agreement with difficulty. Colonel Gundam bought with his own contribution points 8 tons of diesel fuel, Kevlar fiber combat suit, jetpack, porcupine-depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition, 200 rounds, and 500 grams of titanium silver powder. Fang Linian was responsible for bringing the remaining 5 blood orchid leaves to exchange. The trade was divided into 2. The trade location was the cafe at the door, and the only person who came to the trade was Marquand. In the first trade, Fang Linian took out 2 blood orchid leaves for the Kevlar fiber combat suit and the jetpack. In the second trade, Fang Linian took out the remaining 3 leaves and roots for the remaining porcupine-depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition, 200 rounds, 500 grams of titanium silver powder, and a fuel ticket that can extract 8 tons of diesel at any time. Strictly speaking, Colonel Gundam would make a lot of money if this trade was successful. Based on the market price, he only needed 2 blood orchid leaves to exchange for the contribution points he spent. The remaining 4 blood orchid leaves en route were pure profits. Colonel Gundam couldn't help but feel his heart throbbing. After taking a deep breath, he felt that his heart was palpitating quickly, then he looked at the charming female secretary beside, wishing to push her down right now. However, Colonel Gundam quickly regained his insanity. He quickly whispered a few words to the confidant next to him, instructing him to arrange manpower to closely monitor Fang Linian. It was just that Fang Linian mentioned that once he noticed something was wrong, he would immediately destroy the blood orchid leaves he was carrying. At this time, Gundam already regarded the blood orchid leaves as his own. To be honest, his intention to scam Fang Linian was long gone. At present, he was even more worried than Fang Linian about what went wrong in the trade process. Sending people to monitor was just out of his old fox's instinct, and it was of course to prevent accidents from happening. However, when Colonel Gundam sent people there, he also strictly ordered that covering himself was the first priority, so the person monitoring did not dare to follow too closely. This was quite difficult for the person who monitored. If he was a professional, it was fine, but the problem was that although Colonel Gundam's position could gain a lot of profit, what kind of department was he in actually? It was just a car repair shop. No matter how badass the car repair shop's boss was, what kind of good spy could he send? Things such as intelligence and surveillance actually required a lot of knowledge and skills. It must be handled by the professional. Because of so many behind-the-scenes factors, Fang Linian's first trade was very smooth. After the 2 blood orchid leaves were handed over to Marquand, Marquand verified the authenticity with the test strips he carried, then he gave the Kevlar fiber combat suit and jetpack to Fang Linian. Fang Linian only told Marquand that Lieutenant Lucan was very careful and thought that the trade with Colonel Gundam was actually fraudulent. After he inquired about it, he found that Colonel Gundam had a bad reputation and was very cunning, so he had taken the rest for security. The leaf of blood orchid hid outside Yangfan City. He had to send the items back smoothly before he could get the other 3 leaves and roots for the second trade. Therefore, the next trade would be held in the same place in 4 hours. Fang Linian got up and left after speaking. After Marquand got the news at this time, he was dumbfounded for a while, trying to stop Fang Linian, but he found that he had no excuses. Because this time he clearly completed the trade honestly, and he had no reason to blame. Secondly, the other party did not say cancelling the trade, but he only said that the trade would be done in 4 hours. This was not a violation of the rules, right? Marquand was originally not a decisive person, let alone such a big event. After he hesitated for a while, Fang Linian was already 30 meters away. At this moment, he shuddered again. It was because he thought of his uncle's stern scolding before leaving, that was to let him get the fuck back quickly after completing the trade. He shouldn't stay for a second longer, otherwise he would have to taste the whip. So Marquand shuddered, and he immediately grasped the box containing the blood orchid flower leaves while walking quickly toward the maintenance base. He thought in his mind that he should not think much and just report the truth. 2 hours later. It was still the grayish-yellow circular building. Compared with the low and deserted slum houses around, this building seemed to stand out from the crowd. But at this time there were a lot more people inside. They were busy going in and out like ants. Fortunately, the courtyard wall of the building was very high, and the surrounding buildings were also very low, successfully blocking the sight of passers-by. Bloodslave stood behind the curtains on the 3rd floor, frowning and watching these people. Behind him, the slightly fat woman wearing grey frame glasses was still busy. Her expression was indifferent, her fingers tapping on the typewriter in front like a piano player. The speed was so fast that there were illusions near her index fingers and middle fingers. However, even under such circumstances, she could tilt her head from time to time to look at some data and analyze it at the same time. After the analysis was done properly, while typing with one hand, the other hand wrote and drew on the blank note next to her for instructions. When she finished writing, someone next to her would naturally take the note down. 1 mind and 3 tasks. Such a person could only be described as a workaholic, a human CPU. Immediately afterward, Canvas, wearing a long robe and cap, slowly walked upstairs, then she said to the woman in grey frame glasses. Omni, since entering the 2nd phase, the whereabouts of the rest of the contestants are much easier to grasp. I am so bored that my bones are going to rust. Like the last time, we used the Iron Fist Brotherhood to kill the Mad Dog's people, that feeling was great. They hide in the leather warehouse and think it's safe. You all didn't see their expression when the soldiers of the Iron Fist Brotherhood rushed in. That was really gratifying. When will we set up another round to eliminate some people? Bloodslave suddenly sneered at this moment. Canvas, I let you to complete the main mission first this time, so that you can get 3rd place on the racing list. You must remember to return this favor to me in the next phase. Canvas curled her lips and said. Got it. You're really stingy. Omni, try to consider my suggestion. Omni, the woman with grey frame glasses, was still typing and reading the file next to her as if multitasking was piece of cake to her. Simultaneously, she said slowly. According to Guy Kieshan's orders, after the 2nd phase begins, our first goal is to complete the main mission and milestones, all other things should be left behind. Have you seen the list listed by Guy Kieshan? Hurry up and collect it. Although he is not low in the Iron Fist Brotherhood, the rules and regulations of this organization are quite strict. There is no loophole to cheat for contribution points at all. If we can let Guy Kieshan exchange the Type A item before the 3rd phase comes, we will win in this joint trial for sure. Canvas, you have 2 more tasks. Bloodslave, you still have a task on you. Why are you 2 still here? Hurry up and work on it. Do you want me to let Geert urge you? Chapter 97, Complete the main mission. Hearing the implicit threat from Omni, Canvas, and Bloodslave curled their lips and proceeded to do their tasks honestly. It was worth mentioning that Fang Linian's photo at this time was still pinned to the blackboard next to him. He was included in the category of bait, but the blackboard had been pushed far into the corner. At this moment, a person suddenly ran up from below, then he hurriedly put a piece of paper in front of Omni, then he unfolded it for her to read. This woman was still indifferent at first, still continuing to work on 3 tasks, but she stopped and threw the pen behind after looking at the paper. After that, she put all her energy on analyzing the information on this paper. The total number of contribution points owned by Guy Kieshan has now reached the 5th place in the Iron Fist Brotherhood, and the first 4 people have either already redeemed the item or are not interested in it at all. So, under normal circumstances, the chance of us successfully redeeming the item in the Type A items this time is as high as 97.2%. In addition, our team is working for him so that he can quickly gain contribution points. It's almost a sure thing to get there. But, how could this be? How could there be a colonel whose contribution points suddenly soared by almost 900 points? This made his total contribution points ranking suddenly rose from 37 to the current 70th. Such a surge has never happened in the last 2 years and 3 months. At this time, another piece of paper was passed over. After taking a look, Omni pressed her forehead while closing her eyes. She took out and closed his eyes with his brows. Suddenly, she took out a box of yellow Capico potato chips from the drawer and started chewing it. Although she closed her eyes, one could feel her brain cells working at an astonishing high speed. Now I finally found out how the Colonel's contribution points came from. He actually exchanged it with 2 blood orchid flower leaves. Under normal circumstances, the blood orchid flower leaves can't be exchanged for so many contribution points, but Iron Fist Brotherhood's laboratory has not received blood orchid for 3 months. Therefore, Life Dewdrop, a drug that can temporarily extend lifespan, has been out of stock for 2 months. The Colonel is not worried that there are blood orchid flower leaves in his hand. The blood orchid flower leaves that are frozen can be kept fresh for at least 1 year, but those who are waiting for Life Dewdrop can't wait for half a year, so the people who need the leaves actually have no choice. Even if the blood orchid flower leaves are twice, 3 times, or even 10 times the normal market price at this time, people who extend their lives with the Life Dewdrop are forced to buy them. Then, the biggest variable has emerged. A blood orchid flower has 6 leaves, and the value of its root is probably equal to 1 leaf. In other words, there are probably 4 more leaves and a root in the Colonel's hand. This means that he can surpass Guy Qiushin's contribution points at any time and get the qualification to buy that thing as long as he wants. Yellow potato chip crumbs spilled from the corner of Omni's mouth. In such a short time, a box of potato chips had been eaten. She suddenly opened her eyes. The potential of this temporary team has been almost exhausted at this time. In other words, the chance that Guy Qiushin's contribution points increase sharply in a short time to surpass the Colonel is very small, and this incident must happen on this critical moment. The worst thing to us really happens. There is a high probability that someone already knows the secret. Then, if the problem cannot be solved, we can only deal with the person who caused the problem. Thinking of this, she picked up her pen and wrote 6 words on the note. Quickly collect information about the Colonel. Then the message was passed on quickly. It was worth mentioning that when she wrote the note this time, she changed a pen. Red pen. The handwriting was bright red as if it was written in blood. Then, Omni slowly stood up and stretched her body. When she was working, she had a grey dress, grey skirt, and grey glasses. She looked casual and slightly fat, which was like the high-cheeked, thin, and mean old virgin workaholics that were common in the company. But after stretching, the clothes that didn't fit her also tightened, outlining her S-shaped perfect figure. The sight of it made people thrilled. At this moment, the man seen next to him had a strong primitive feeling of having sex. His throat suddenly became a little dry as he couldn't help licking his lips. However, the beautiful scene was always short-lived. Omni dusted the potato chip crumbs on her chest, stood up straight, and became indifferent like that robot again. She walked a few steps slowly and came to the blackboard that had been pushed to the corner of the wall. A dozen photos had been densely nailed on this blackboard. The word bait was written on the top of the blackboard. Fang Linian's photo was also in the lower left corner, which was not very eye-catching. Looking at this blackboard, Omni looked thoughtful, then she slowly said, "I didn't expect to use these chess pieces so soon." Of course, Fang Linian didn't know that he was being targeted at this moment. He was out of the city at this time. After staying in a condescending abandoned building for 20 minutes, he confirmed that he was not being followed, and he was relieved. After setting up a few sound traps with empty cans, he hid inside an abandoned house and began to examine his harvest. First of all, Fang Linian took out the exchanged Kevlar fiber combat suit. After removing the packaging, it was just like the Advanced Shock Enhancement Module, Special, exchanged by Lieutenant Lucan. After he got it, the related attributes were directly displayed. Kevlar fiber combat suit. Type, armor, condition, excellent. Place of origin, Yangfan City. Equipment rarity, blue. Equipment slot, chest. Material, reinforced Kevlar fiber, plastic, thread. Equipment, increased defense by 5 points. Equipment, increase defense against range physical attacks by 5 points. Modifier slot 1, blank. You can choose to install additional specific armor piece to further enhance your defense, but some armor piece may reduce your agility. Weight, 2.4 kilograms. Required conditions, the strength value must reach 4 points. Special effect, kinetic energy absorption. When taking a range physical attack, there is a 40% chance to absorb 10 damage. When calculating the actual damage, the absorbed damage will be deducted first, and then the defense damage reduction will be calculated. Evaluation, in terms of protection, it can be said that it has fully utilized its potential, but it certainly represents the inaction of the rest. If you want a bigger surprise, then please choose a specific armor piece. After understanding the attributes of this blue suit, Fang Linian was delightly, because this thing could improve his current weakest survivability. Before his naked defense was only a pitiful 1.5 points, according to the formula, he could only reduce the damage by 5.66%, which was really better than nothing. Even after adding the average protective gear bought with platinum coin, his defense only increased to 6.5 points, and his agility was reduced by 1 point. After putting on this suit, his defense immediately soared to 11.5 points, which was 7 times more than when he didn't have a suit. He could reduce damage by 31.51%. Most of the gun shooting was also a range physical attack. When fighting against this type of damage, his defense even reached 16.5 points. He could reduce range damage by 39.75%. This did not include the special effect with a 40% chance of triggering damage reduction. For Fang Linian, such a buff was really a timely help. It greatly alleviated his low HP status. After playing with this combat suit for a while, he put it on decisively. He planned to never take it off if it wasn't necessary. Then, Fang Linian picked up the jetpack and unpacked it again. Unfortunately, the exchanged jetpack doesn't show any attributes. This meant that this thing was not an item or equipment recognized by the space, so there was no way to bring it out of this world. Damn, Fang Linian really wanted to curse now. He looked at this thing, and he suddenly had a thought to modify it. After all, he still had some skills in terms of mechanics. Besides, the key was that he had disassembled a scrapped jetpack before, so he had accumulated some experiences. He had at least 60% of modifying it, but unfortunately he didn't have a suitable tool at hand. While studying the jetpack, after 10 minutes, a message popped up on Fang Linian's retinas. You have successfully held Iron Fist Brotherhood's Type B equipment/items, Kevlar fiber combat suits and jetpack for 10 minutes. You completed the main mission, the symbol of Steel Fist. Your time is 4 hours, 43 minutes and 9 seconds. Seeing this, Fang Linian showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. To be honest, being able to complete the mission so quickly had exceeded his expectations. His optimistic estimation was probably 6 hours. He remembered clearly that this time the main mission had a clear prompt: the faster you complete the mission, the higher the reward you will get. At this speed, not to mention the completion of the first one, it shouldn't be a problem to at least get into the top 3. With full expectation, Fang Linian continued to look down. Then, his eyes widened, and he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. How could this be? Chapter 98, Warning. The mission prompt in Fang Linian's eyes was so ruthless. You are the 26th person who completed this main mission and failed to enter the racing list. Hope you will work hard next time. You got, basic reward, primary healing potion. This potion can be used directly with your mind, and it can directly restore 25 HP after use, but after using it, it will take 15 minutes before you can use the same potion. You can't get the rewards of the racing list. You are in the 20th-30th completion range, so you have received an additional ranking reward, 300 common points. Looking at these prompts, Fang Linian was stunned. He was not surprised to get the primary healing potion. What stunned him was the order of completing the mission. To be honest, he already felt that he completed the main mission fast enough. However, in the end, he actually only got 26th place. He was not even on the so-called racing list. This was too incredible. Fang Linian took a few deep breaths to quickly cover the negative emotions in his heart. He slowly closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Then, he picked up a branch and wrote a word on the ground. Team. Yes, Fang Linian admitted at this time that he totally underestimated the strength of the team. If one person was restricted to do this main mission, Fang Linian was confident to enter the top 3. However, the only reasonable explanation that could push him directly to the 26th place was that the 26 people in front had used the power of the team, and then left him directly behind in terms of completion time. Although the previous main mission repeatedly reminded him to find companions, he still habitually ignored it because Fang Linian had a strong desire for control and a strong sense of vigilance. Since the death of Uncle Su, he even felt that there was no one in the world who he could trust wholeheartedly. So the cold reality immediately taught Fang Linian a lesson. Immediately afterward, Fang Linian pondered for a while and wrote another sentence. The insiders are more than one. Before entering this joint trial, Fang Linian was prepared for what was about to happen, and he even took the initiative to come in. He even thought that he was the only one who knew that the joint trial was about to start. However, after he found the powerful Evil Zen at the ticket office of the dock, Fang Linian had an ominous premonition. After he discovered that Evil Zen was escorting the person with the word Shan in his name to participate in the joint trial, he knew how naive he was before. Now, Fang Linian thought he was very good, but after being taught a lesson by this 26th place, he thoroughly felt the cruelty of joint trial. As for the reason why he judged that there was more than one insider, it was also very simple. The essence of the joint trial was to select the most excellent contestants who remained until the end. It was not difficult to speculate that just like the NBA draft or the imperial examination, the first person to be selected must be of great benefit. Then, the insiders would not form too big a team. Otherwise, the remaining team members would also be their competitors. Not only that, if they wanted to temporarily form a team after entering the world, they must first find out the details of the team members, and then convince them to join. They also needed to integrate the team and also build their own prestige. These things had to be completed within a limited time. If there were too many people, it was impossible to manage all of them. Therefore, Fang Linian speculated that if the insiders wanted to form a team, the number of team members would definitely not be too many. If Fang Linian were to form a team, the total number of people in the team would certainly not exceed 3. Even if the rest of the insiders were much better than him, they would definitely not exceed 6 team members. Then, the 26 people ahead of him should belong to at least 4 different teams. The leader of each team was very likely to be an insider or even an insider supported by a contractor like Shan. Because it couldn't be ruled out that 2 insiders reach an agreement to enter a team, nor could it be ruled out that there were monsters who did not take the usual path and build a large team happily. Therefore, Fang Linian believed that the number of insiders should be 3 to 5, these people posed the biggest threat to him. After clarifying these things, Fang Linian looked at the previous system prompt and read out the true meaning from it. This is space for warnings and prompts. Don't think that you are so good by doing a lone wolf. In front of the team, your efforts are destined to be crushed. Fang Linian felt it at this time. What space wanted should be members who resembled soldiers in the army, they followed orders and had strict discipline. Although this method of team combat had stifled the rapid growth of individual elites in a sense, it was undoubtedly the most effective and rapid improvement for the overall combat power. Fang Linian thought on the spot for a while, then he stood up, wiped the dust on his face, put on a cloth with a hood, and planned to re-enter Yangfan City. Of course, he was not going to complete the trade of 3 blood orchid leaves for porcupine-depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition, 200 rounds, 500 grams of titanium silver powder, and ticket for 8 tons of diesel. Because in Fang Linian's mind, when he successfully got jetpack and Kevlar fiber combat suits, his transaction with Colonel Gundam was officially completed. As for the last trade, it was entirely a smokescreen released by Fang Linian. With this smokescreen, Colonel Gundam would look forward to the last trade, then he would let him leave safely during the first trade. If Fang Linian really went to the last trade stupidly, what was waiting for him was most likely not a ticket for 8 tons of diesel, porcupine-depleted uranium armor-piercing ammunition, 200 rounds, and 500 grams of titanium silver powder but a bullet in his temple. Colonel Gundam, a ruthless and cunning guy, would turn hostile in the end. For him, if Fang Linian had no use value, then why did he have to trade with items? What a joke! Even Fang Linian could imagine his mental state. Now that the lucky kid has arrived at the maintenance base, the 3 blood orchid flower leaves en route are of course mine. If I don't take them is there still justice? Is there still law? How can I sleep tonight? Forget about honesty, if I say it, can I still face the few dogs that ate my conscience more than 50 years ago? At this time, Fang Linian changed his outlook and returned to Yangfan City. Of course, he wanted to hurry up and do one thing, that was, to complete another milestone. Fang Linian had completed 4 milestones at this time, and he had received the wearable titles, Scholar, Murderer, Black Market, One Time, Stark's Blessing, Temporary. Among them, the title of Scholar was obtained in the 811 world, but the remaining 3 titles were obtained in this world. When entering the world, there was a clear message prompt. It was said that this world was a joint trial world. In addition to obtaining the above milestones, it also had an additional hidden milestone. Once he unlocked more than 4, including 4, milestones in this world, he would receive additional rewards. Fang Linian had now unlocked 3 milestones in this world. Now that there were still 30+ hours before the end of the second phase, he anxiously wanted to know what rewards he could get after getting the 4th milestone. After that, he would consider joining a team. At this time, Fang Linian was a little grateful that he had completed the time-limited milestone of time is my friend and money. Otherwise, it would be a bit tricky to achieve the 4 major milestones. On the way back to Yangfan City, the sky began to turn dark. The vortex-like white clouds in the sky disappeared. Instead, clusters of light grey clouds spread from all directions. These dark clouds were very low from the ground, thick and obscure. Just the sight of it gave people the feeling of black clouds crushing the city. It looked like the entire world was going to be overwhelmed by darkness. A few decades ago, such storm weather was very deadly. In addition to thunderstorms, strong winds, flying rocks, etc., the most terrifying thing was the surface radiation dust blown up by strong winds. Once inhaled, the minor case would be pneumoconiosis and radiation sickness, the major case would be death due to overexposure to radiation. Unlike human fear, the rest of the creatures on the wasteland looked excited. A large number of troll grass began to form ball-sized grass balls, running wildly on the desolate desert. The fierce wind could provide sufficient power to take them far away, rebury their own seeds, and multiply and grow. The desert guinea pig also began to emerge, quickly digging a channel to the depths of its cave, so that rainwater could be poured into the puddle more conveniently. After all, in the next few months, it would rely on puddles' water to survive on this arid and barren land. The leaves of somu grass had also begun to change from a rolled state to an unfolded state in order to absorb more water as much as possible. Seeing this scene, Fang Linian quickened his pace and entered Yangfan City when the storm was about to fall. Chapter 99, Misentry. At this time, Fang Linian had already chosen the 2 milestones of Forbidden Music Listener and Gun Lover as a breakthrough. First of all, he would go to a gun shop where he could test shoot, trying to get the milestone of Gun Lover with 1 attempt. Then he would inquire about the whereabouts of the Black Friday tune along the way. After throwing out 2 copper coins as a tip, Fang Linian was taken by a shabby boy to the southern part of Yangfan City. The commerce here was also quite developed, but it was more chaotic relatively speaking. The boy stopped in front of a shop, then he said timidly, "Sir, you can definitely find a satisfying gun here." Then the boy left. Fang Linian looked up and found that the shop's sign was unique. It was in the shape of a big skull inlaid with yellow bullet shells. The name of the shop was also very strange. It was called Three-Legged Dog, but the guns placed on the showcase didn't look good. One of the barrels was even rusty, some had only half of the stock left, and it was burnt to black. There was also a grenade launcher that was distorted like a twist bread. But when looking carefully, these weapons were all placed in oak boxes, surrounded by gold rims, and finally cushioned with red silk. They looked quite solemn, and there seemed to be a nameplate underneath. "Boy, you seem to be interested in my brothers." A voice suddenly came from behind Fang Linian. A burly middle-aged man, with neatly combed hair, meticulous clothing, and a straight waist, was talking loudly. He looked energized. Probably because his leg was hurt, so he even had a cane in his hand. Hearing what he said, Fang Linian was taken aback and said, "Ah, I'm sorry. I didn't seem to hear clearly. Did you make a mistake? You mean brothers?" The middle-aged man immediately said loudly. "Of course. Will I, Boozer, lie? The thing that can accompany you on the battlefield, help you kill those damn robot monsters, and always stay with you, what is it if it is not your brother?" As he said, he pointed to the rusty rifle and said, "This is my brother, Mr. Winsafe. Tong." He started serving in March 47 in the new calendar and retired in April 49 in the new calendar. During this period, he killed 3 mechanical creatures. The reason for his retirement was due to a broken bolt, and the rifling inside the barrel was flattened. After hearing what he said, Fang Linian was stunned and pointed to the grenade launcher and said, "What about this gentleman? Wow! Zhukov has made great achievements. During his 7 years and 10 months of service, he destroyed 8 Reaper and 2 Purgers, and even caused heavy damage to a Predator warship. At that time, its appearance of emitting smoke was really gratifying. However, Zhukov's luck was probably exhausted in the last battle. The Purger's destructive flail smashed on Zhukov, causing him irreparable damage." While the middle-aged Boozer continued to talk with great interest, a strong wind mixed with sand and dust suddenly blew over, causing both of them to cough at the same time. Boozer began to frantically close the windows. Fang Linian saw that he was struggling. He took the initiative to step forward to help. When they closed all the windows, there were already big drops of rain falling. In such inclement weather, Iron Fist Brotherhood directly stopped the power supply to non-critical areas. The middle-aged man took out the matchbox from the side and swiped it on the wall. An orange flame ignited. Of course, it was accompanied by the pungent smell of sulfur. Immediately afterward, he lit a lantern that had been wiped clean and hung it on the wall. The dark room was brightened instantly. Although it seemed like a grocery store with a wide range of goods, a wall had been specially opened to display the firearms, which looked quite professional. At this time, the sound of wind and rain were mixed together. It could only be described as a dreadful clamor. After a strong wind blew, the entire house was shaking slightly, little dust fell from above. Boozer found a towel to wipe his face, then he looked at Fang Linian and said, "Boy, you were wandering outside my shop, do you want to buy something?" Fang Linian nodded and said, "Oh, I'm here to look for guns." Boozer said, "Then you are really discerning because you are already standing in the best gun shop in Yangfan City. I only sell fine products here. May I know what you need? Just tell me." In fact, few people have been patient enough to listen to my introduction to the two old guys. Because of this, I can give you a 20% discount. After hearing this, Fang Linian said, "Okay." Then he walked to the gun holder. "By the way, can I take it down and see it?" Boozer shrugged and made an inviting gesture. Fang Linian went to check it, and he took it off the gun holder and looked at it carefully. To be honest, these weapons were well maintained. They should be disassembled frequently and wiped with gun oil. The surface was very smooth and spotless. But the first pistol immediately made Fang Linian feel a little inappropriate because firearms were, after all, industrialized products with many metal parts inside. For Fang Linian, who had the top level of bench work, could almost know the conditions of these parts. "This gun looks okay on the outside, but it's just superficial. At least, 3 parts are refurbished. The durability of the other 2 parts is extremely low. If this gun is used a dozen times, there will immediately be a problem." After just touching it twice, Fang Linian came to this conclusion in his mind. However, a gun could not explain much, so Fang Linian took down another KMC rifle. This rifle was obviously modified to deliberately strengthen the range and armor penetration, but the weight and noise were significantly increased. This gun seemed fine on the surface, but it was just fine, it was still too far away from being a quality item. When Fang Linian saw the third gun, the urge to comment was already surging in his throat, reaching the point of unstoppable. Because this stun gun had a complicated structure, so according to Fang Linian's visual inspection, at least 3 different parts of the old gun were used for assembly. Some parts even had to be forcibly bent before they could be assembled together. The gun seemed functional, but Fang Linian could make a bet that if this gun could fire more than 10 times, he would share a photo of him wearing a bikini. Now, Fang Linian already knew what kind of goods were sold here. His original purpose was to find a cheap bargain here. He wanted to see if he could find a weapon that could be recognized by the space, then he would buy it directly with platinum coin. Wasn't that a beautiful plan? However, the truth was always cruel. The boss here just regarded him as the cheap bargain. After discovering the truth, Fang Linian shrugged and carefully put down the gun, then he said, "I'm so sorry, I don't think the guns here are suitable for me." Boozer's face suddenly showed a hint of astonishment, and he said sincerely, "What? I have all the good things here. Everyone is a rare quality gun. Boy, look at you, you are so weak. Walking alone on the wasteland is really dangerous." After finishing talking, the middle-aged man easily took a Mauser rifle from the gun holder. Fang Linian was familiar with this gun and couldn't help saying, Is this what the legendary?" Boozer immediately said, "Yes, it is the famous 98K. When the enemy sees it on the battlefield, they are frightened." Then he handed the weapon directly to Fang Linian. "Trust me, it is your partner in this life. It can protect you from others, help you find food, let you escape from those damn mechanical creatures, and help you rescue beauty from bad guys. I have treasured this gun for 30 years. It's called William. It's like my godson. Today, I think it's a good match for you, so I will only sell you 2 platinum coins. You have to treat him well." Fang Linian took the gun stupidly, and he couldn't help but complain in terms of its weight. It was not as heavy as a child's toy gun. Then he tapped on the gun stock, he was stupefied instantly. Although he was mentally prepared enough, he did not expect that someone would compact it with sawdust and apply a layer of paint on the surface to pretend it is an oak gun stock. He didn't dare to dismantle the gun at this time. In case this thing, oh no, Mr. William had any accident, wouldn't he really have to use 2 platinum coins to compensate? For an instant, Fang Linian felt as if he had touched hot coal, then he extremely carefully put Mr. William back onto the gun holder. Then, he first put his hands in his trouser pockets. This was to prevent Boozer from suddenly passing strange things over again. He then said in a decisive tone. "I'm sorry, sir, what is the platinum coin you said? I only have copper coins." Boozer was stunned, but he immediately said with a big smile. "It doesn't matter, copper coins will do as well. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Laxia to you." Hey, what are you doing? Don't open the door, it's still stormy outside. It's very dangerous. Chapter 100, Recruitment. Fang Linian left the 3-legged dog almost at the speed of running for life. Although the wind and rain were not small outside, he still felt that it was safer to stay outside. This boss Boozer was really terrifying. When he started to sell the 98k, for some reason, Fang Linian's ears could actually hear the passionate and magical shout of "Face the Wind," originated from League of Legends Yasuo's voice line, then he couldn't help himself to pay up the money. Fortunately, Fang Linian got through it with determination. After leaving the 3-legged dog, Fang Linian found a place to hide from the rain under the opposite eaves. After waiting for 10 minutes, the rain stopped, but the sky was still terribly gloomy. It seemed to be brewing something. Fang Linian continued to wander around the street at this time, then he found a gun shop. At this time, he had no desire to pick up the cheap bargain. After strolling around, he said to the boss. "I am planning to buy a weapon now, but I want to try which gun is right for me, so I may have to test several weapons and check the accuracy in the shooting range." Of course, all of this was not free. Facing Fang Linian's request, the boss didn't feel surprised at all because many people had such requests. Therefore, he told Fang Linian that he didn't have such service here, but if Fang Linian could pay 5 copper coins, he could which shooting range had this service, and it only cost a few hundred copper coins. According to the boss's introduction, Fang Linian came to the address he said. Then, he sighed helplessly and covered his face. Unexpectedly, after taking a few twists and turns, he finally came back to this place, the shooting range that was officially opened by Iron Fist Brotherhood. Fang Linian had already tried his best to avoid Iron Fist Brotherhood as much as possible because of the trade, but he didn't expect to deal with them in the end. At this time, Fang Linian thought for a while. "I told Marquand that the trade starts 4 hours later, now there is still 1 hour before the agreed trading time." Even if they realized that Fang Linian was late, Colonel Gundam would definitely wait for another hour before realizing that he was tricked. Even if Colonel Gundam realized this, it was not easy to find people in this chaotic Yangfan city. The population here was very mobile. Because of the apocalypse, the household registration ID system was not perfect. After Fang Linian deliberately changed his outlook, it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. After all, Colonel Gundam was just a car repair factory director. Even if he was furious, he had few direct resources at his disposal. He couldn't really let a group of repairmen go to the streets to find someone, right? He could only ask for help with relationship. But this option was limited. Could Colonel Gundam tell others, "There is a fool who agreed to trade his blood orchid flower leaves with me, but I got stood up, can you help me find that person?" After saying this, others would immediately use all their resources to find Fang Linian and hand him over. But needless to say, they would only hand over the person. "What? Blood orchid flower leaves? I didn't even see them." After weighing the pros and cons, Fang Linian decided to go to the shooting range to complete the mission. As long as he leaves within 1 hour, he would be safe. Because according to his own calculations, Marquand and others would only think he was late after 1 hour. After arriving at the shooting range, Fang Linian realized that it was quite regular and heavily guarded, and there were a total of 6 exits in the shooting range. The guards could be seen everywhere. Fang Linian immediately understood that there must be a large number of contestants who came here to achieve milestones. If the management was lax here, it was inevitable that there would be some people with destructive personalities or violent tendencies causing trouble here. Therefore, such tight security could guarantee the safety of the contestant in the initial stage of exploration. They could rest assured to achieve the milestone. However, because of this, there were a lot of people queuing in the shooting range. Fang Linian showed the copper badge that Lieutenant Lucan gave him. Sure enough, this thing could also be used in the official shooting range, so he enjoyed the privilege of skipping the queue. Then Fang Linian picked up the gun after paying the money, and he just shot randomly. Not to mention the bullseye, only half of the bullets hit the target. He just looked cool on the surface, but he was a complete rookie. It was only then that he realized embarrassedly that although he had the basic shooting LV1, he was actually just a rookie. In addition, the weapons of this world were obviously different from those of the previous 811 world, so he could only aim and shoot honestly. However, his action still looked very jerky. At this time, a tall man in black passed by, glanced at Fang Linian and suddenly said, "Newcomer." Fang Linian nodded honestly. The man in black looked a bit vicious, but his tone was very gentle. He patiently told Fang Linian the difference between guns and the main points of shooting. It wasn't until a partner urged him several times that he patted Fang Linian on the shoulder and said, "Put more effort, stay alive." Hearing these words, Fang Linian looked up in amazement. "The same to you." The man in black smiled slightly and said, "You are already good in getting the Iron Fist Brotherhood's copper badge by yourself. It is worth my investment. Next time I see you, I hope you can be stronger." After speaking, he threw a small bag the size of a palm, then he turned and walked away. Fang Linian was a little stunned, but he immediately realized that this was actually a very simple reasoning process. When I show my bronze badge, the man should have seen it just now. If I have joined the team or have a fixed companion, I should come with my companion to do the milestone mission. In this way, it can increase security in unfamiliar places, and I can have some guidance on my shitty marksmanship. Therefore, I have a high probability of being a lone wolf or I have a team, but I'm not important. Of course, even if the man in black made a wrong judgment, there is no loss to him, it is just a casual investment by him. Regardless, Fang Linian immediately became vigilant and warned himself not to be careless. Now there were contestants hidden everywhere. He had to keep the mentality of walking on thin ice. After staying for a while, Fang Linian opened the small bag thrown by the man in black. After opening it, he first discovered that there was a shooting card inside which could be used to exchange 100 rounds of various bullets. Not only that, there was a platinum coin and a folded paper under the small bag. There were several addresses written on the paper. The first address was a gun shop, and it specially stated that although the price of the gun here was 20% more expensive than the market, the reliability was very good. The second address was a hotel. The third address was a grocery store. It was clearly written on it that the owner of this grocery store was a supplier of Steel Fist Fortress, so he could receive some missions from time to time. If you are lucky, these missions could even increase the reputation of the Iron Fist Brotherhood. There was no doubt that the contents of this small bag were very important to the rookie, even if it was Fang Linian, the contents in it were quite practical to him. The contact information was written on the back of the paper. Every night at 8:30, the Old Oak Inn, look for Givens. After seeing this, Fang Linian also understood. Givens, the man in black, was obviously an insider. Maybe there was a contractor supporting him. Undoubtedly, he was also a big boss in the presence of the contestants. It seemed like he wanted to recruit Fang Linian. At this time, someone in the back screamed impatiently. The people in the queue saw Fang Linian dazing for 6 minutes, and they were immediately annoyed. They were not well-educated people, so they immediately yelled. Those who kept order knew that Fang Linian had a bronze badge, so they quickly stepped forward, took off their belts and whipped them ruthlessly until they bled all over. They got kicked out in the end. However, after such a disturbance, Fang Linian continued to practice guns, but the effect was better than before. What else can I do at this time? Fang Linian could only brainwash himself repeatedly, emphasizing that this was not his own problem but a gun problem. Finally, he simply outsmarted by moving the target directly toward him, then shot it one by one. Finally, he completed the gun lover's milestone. Such behavior also caused the people around him to cast contemptuous glances. They thought that this kid was really crazy, he even did such a deceitful thing to himself, but they didn't know that Fang Linian was helpless. Next, Fang Linian honestly finished the bullets, and he found that the rifle was relatively handy to him. Before he realized it, the basic shooting was successfully promoted to LV2. When Fang Linian walked out of the door more than a dozen steps, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. After encountering Givens, he had already heightened his vigilance. So he checked the back calmly, and he realized that a man wearing a leather cap was following him in a hurry, and his tracking skills were a bit sloppy. Probably because he was only staring at his target, so he accidentally bumped into a stall next to him, making the boss furious and even causing some trouble.